You have exactly 10 seconds to walk back out that door, or I will personally make sure you never set foot in this building again." The words hit like a slap in the marble-floored foyer of Savannah's most celebrated restaurant. A man the size of a refrigerator blocked the hallway to the dining room, arms folded across a black polo stretched tight at the shoulders, chin tilted down at the woman standing 5 feet in front of him. Behind him, crystal chandeliers threw soft gold light across white tablecloths, wine glasses, and the faces of 40 diners who had all stopped mid-conversation to watch. The woman in the gray hoodie didn't move. She was 5'6", maybe 130 pounds. Canvas sneakers, no jewelry, hair pulled back in a simple twist. She held a small leather notebook in her left hand and nothing else. No purse visible, no phone raised, no defensive posture of any kind. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes from having stood in front of far worse than a restaurant bouncer and walked away intact. He had no idea what he'd just started. The woman he was threatening to throw out owned every square inch of the building he was standing in, including the floor under his boots. Narrator. 31 seconds. That's how long the confrontation had been going when a second voice cut in from behind the host stand. Female, clipped, carrying the particular authority of someone who signs paychecks. "Brock, I'll handle this." The big man stepped aside, not far. Just enough to let a woman in a tailored cream blazer and heels slide between him and the entrance. She smiled at the woman in the hoodie. Not warmth, not welcome. Assessment. The kind of smile a jeweler gives a stone before deciding its paste. "I'm the general manager, and I'm afraid we do have a dress standard here." A pause calibrated to sting. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. There are several lovely spots along the riverfront." The woman in the hoodie looked past her, past the host stand, past the brass-framed dress code sign mounted on the wall, past the dining room full of white faces watching this unfold like dinner theater. Her eyes moved the way a camera moves, precise, unhurried, recording. Then she reached into her hoodie pocket. The big man's hand shot toward her arm. She pulled out a pen, clicked it once, opened the leather notebook to a blank page, and wrote date, time, 2 names she'd already memorized, and a single line she underlined twice. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, didn't explain, just wrote, as if she'd been expecting this exact moment, as if she'd walked in here tonight looking for precisely this. The pen stopped. She closed the notebook, looked at the general manager one more time. "Thank you. That's all I needed." And she walked out into the Savannah evening, past the wrought iron gas lamps and the Spanish moss and the tourists who had no idea what had just happened inside those walls. Behind her, the general manager exhaled, straightened her blazer, and turned back to the dining room with a practiced smile. Order restored. Problem handled. Another evening saved. She had no idea that the woman she'd just humiliated would be signing her termination paperwork in less than 6 weeks. If you're already hooked, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is about to go places you won't see coming. Narrator. 3 weeks before that night in the foyer, a Tuesday morning in a renovated bungalow 8 miles outside Savannah's historic district began the way every Tuesday morning began in that house, with silence and precision. The coffee maker clicked on at 5:45 a.m., not because it was programmed, it wasn't, but because the woman who lived there woke at 5:43 every morning without an alarm and walked to the kitchen in the same order. Bathroom, face, teeth, kitchen, coffee. The mug was already on the counter. The spoon was already beside it. 1 sugar, measured, not estimated. Her name was Opal Sadler, 42 years old. She lived alone in a 3-bedroom bungalow she'd bought with cash 4 years ago, though only 1 bedroom was furnished. The second was an office. The third was empty, the door always closed. The front porch had 2 rocking chairs she never used. The yard was mowed every Thursday by a service she paid 6 months in advance. She stood at the kitchen counter in a plain white t-shirt and running shorts, drinking coffee while reviewing a manila folder that had been sitting on the table since last night. The folder was thick, maybe 40 pages, and organized with colored tabs, red for dates, blue for names, yellow for direct quotes. Each page was a printout of an email, and each email described the same place. The Copper Table, Bull Street, Savannah. She read one aloud to herself, voice low, as if testing how the words would sound in a room that wasn't her kitchen. Reservation confirmed for 7:30 p.m., party of 4. Arrived on time. Told there was a 45-minute wait. White couple behind us. No reservation. Seated immediately. When I asked the hostess, she said they were regulars. We've eaten there 6 times. The email was dated 3 months ago. The sender's name was marked with a blue tab. She turned to the next one. My braids were cited as not meeting the dress code. The sign says no athletic wear, no swimwear, no offensive graphics. My braids are none of those things. The hostess wouldn't give me a manager's name or a corporate number. Another. Server took 25 minutes to bring water. I timed it. The table next to us, white couple, had drinks within 4 minutes of sitting down. Another. Asked for a comment card. Was told they don't have one. Asked for a corporate contact. Was told to check the website. Website has no complaint form. Opal closed the folder, finished her coffee, rinsed the mug, dried it, placed it back on the counter in the exact position it had occupied before. Then she opened a second folder, thinner, with a green cover, and reviewed its contents without reading aloud. Financial documents, contracts, a spreadsheet with 6 rows and 12 columns. She studied the spreadsheet for 4 minutes, tracing one row with her fingertip, then closed it and returned both folders to the same spot on the table, edges aligned with the table's edge. The shoes by the front door were lined up in pairs. Running shoes, canvas sneakers, 1 pair of low heels still in their box. Jackets hung on the same 3 hooks in the same order every day. The car keys sat in a ceramic dish on the hall table, positioned so the keychain faced right. None of this was remarkable. People had routines, but Opal's routines had the quality of a system rather than a habit. Each element positioned to reduce decision-making, to free mental bandwidth for whatever actually required her attention. It was the kind of discipline that gets trained into people, not the kind they choose. She pulled on jeans, the gray hoodie, and the canvas sneakers, no jewelry, no makeup. She looked at herself in the hallway mirror for 2 seconds, not vanity, verification, and left the house at 6:51 a.m. The morning errands took her through Savannah's historic district, where the squares were filling with joggers and dog walkers and tourists already photographing the moss-draped oaks. She stopped at a hardware store for a box of file folders, at a print shop for copies she'd ordered online the day before, and at a cafe on Broughton Street for a second coffee she didn't need, but ordered because the cafe was next door to the Copper Table and had a window seat with a direct view of the restaurant's entrance. She sat there for 40 minutes, watching. At 7:22 a.m., a delivery truck pulled up to the Copper Table's service entrance. 2 kitchen staff in white jackets unloaded produce crates. At 7:38, a woman in a cream blazer arrived in a silver Audi, parked in the reserved spot closest to the front door, and entered through the main entrance without locking her car. At 7:41, a large man in a black polo arrived on foot from the direction of the parking garage, drank something from a metal thermos on the sidewalk, and entered through the same door. Opal noted each arrival in her leather notebook. Time, description, vehicle if applicable. She didn't look like she was taking notes. She looked like she was journaling, or making a grocery list, or doing whatever solitary women do in cafe windows at 7:30 in the morning in a city full of tourists. At 8:05, she paid her bill. Cash, no tip on the receipt because she left the tip in cash on the table, a habit that left no paper trail connecting her card to this location, and walked out. She didn't walk toward the Copper Table. She walked past it on the opposite sidewalk, close enough to read the brass frame sign in the window, the Copper Table. Dress code and guest conduct policy. Management reserves the right to refuse service to any guest not meeting our standards of appropriate attire. Prohibited: athletic wear, swimwear, clothing bearing offensive graphics or language. All other dress code determinations are at management's sole discretion. She read it twice, photographed it with her phone from across the street, a distance that made the photo look accidental, touristy, a snapshot of the historic building rather than its posted policy. Then she walked on. The boutique on the next block was the kind of place that smelled like linen and money. Opal browsed a rack of silk scarves without particular interest, moving slowly between displays. Within 90 seconds, a clerk appeared at her elbow, not to help, but to watch. The clerk followed at a 3-foot distance, rearranging items on shelves that didn't need rearranging, eyes tracking Opal's hands every time they touched fabric. Opal picked up a scarf, examined the price tag, set it down, moved to the next rack. The clerk followed. Opal picked up a blouse, held it against herself, set it down. The clerk followed. This continued for 6 minutes. At no point did the clerk offer assistance, a fitting room, or a greeting. She simply followed. Close enough to intervene, far enough to claim she was just doing her job. Opal left without buying anything. On the sidewalk, she opened the leather notebook and wrote, date, time, store name, clerk description, white female, mid-20s, brown hair, name tag reads Shelby, and a single note, followed continuously, no greeting, no assistance offered, duration 6 minutes. She didn't look angry. She didn't look hurt. She wrote with the mechanical efficiency of someone filling out a form, because to her, that's exactly what it was. A form, a data point, one more entry in a collection that was growing larger by the day. The next stop was a cafe 2 blocks south. Lunch hour. The place was half empty. Opal asked for a table by the window. The hostess, white, early 30s, pleasant enough, seated her at a 2-top near the kitchen corridor, despite 4 empty window tables visible from the entrance. Those are reserved, the hostess said, without being asked. Opal sat down, ordered iced tea. The server arrived in 3 minutes, efficient and professional, and for a moment the data point didn't materialize. Then a white couple walked in, no reservation, casual clothes, flip-flops, and the hostess seated them at a window table. The same table Opal had been told was reserved. She wrote it down. Date, time, cafe name, hostess description, seating discrepancy. Closed the notebook, finished her tea, left a cash tip on the table, and walked out. Narrator. By the end of that first week, Opal Sadler had filled 11 pages of the leather notebook with observations from 7 businesses in Savannah's historic district. Each entry followed the same format: date, time, location, personnel description, incident description, and a single-line assessment she wrote in shorthand only she could read. She never raised her voice, never confronted anyone, never asked to speak to a manager, or filed a complaint. She simply moved through the city like a current through water. Present, persistent, and building force no one could see yet. The copper table was different from the others. The others were data points. The copper table was the reason she was here. On Wednesday evening of that first week, Opal sat on a bench in Johnson Square, 2 blocks from the restaurant, and made a phone call. I need another week before I move to phase 2. Her voice was low, measured. She listened. No, the pattern is consistent with what the complaints describe. Selective enforcement, differential treatment. The dress code language is deliberately vague. Management's sole discretion gives them legal cover for anything. She listened again. I'll document 3 direct interactions before I escalate. I want the data airtight. She hung up, slid the phone into her hoodie pocket, sat for another minute watching the evening foot traffic. Couples heading to dinner, families with strollers, a horse-drawn carriage clopping past with tourists waving from the back seat, and then stood up and walked back to her car. The person on the other end of that call would become important later, but not yet. For now, they were just a voice, someone Opal trusted enough to call from a park bench at dusk, someone who listened without interrupting and didn't argue when she said she needed more time, someone who understood that the work she was doing required patience and precision and a tolerance for being treated badly by people who didn't know they were being watched. Narrator. The first direct interaction happened on a Thursday evening, 7:15 p.m., the Copper Table's flagship location on Bull Street. The dinner rush was building. Valets parking cars, couples filing through the front door, the hostess station busy with reservations and walk-ins. The foyer smelled like rosemary and charred steak and the particular cologne that money wears in the American South. Opal walked in wearing the gray hoodie, clean jeans, and white canvas sneakers. Hair in a twist, no jewelry. She'd chosen the outfit deliberately, clean, intact, inoffensive by any objective standard, but coded in ways she understood perfectly. The hoodie said casual. The jeans said working class. The sneakers said she hadn't come from an office. And her skin said everything the dress code sign couldn't say out loud. The host's stand was occupied by the large man she'd cataloged on Tuesday morning, Brock Henley, according to the name tag she could now read up close. He looked at her the way you look at a wrong turn, not hostile yet, but already calculating the correction. Table for one, please. He didn't check the reservation book, didn't glance at the screen, didn't do any of the things a host is supposed to do when a customer requests a table. We're fully booked tonight. The reservation screen behind him, an iPad mounted on a brass stand, was angled slightly toward the wall, but not enough. She could see it from where she stood. The 8 o'clock time slot showed at least 4 open two-tops highlighted in green. Available. Unbooked. Empty. I see, she said. Nothing else. She stood still, notebook in her left hand, pen in her right. Not threatening, not leaving, just present. The woman in the cream blazer appeared from the back hallway. Vivian Tate, according to the business card pinned behind the host stand's brass frame, general manager. She moved with the efficiency of someone who manages by appearance. Hair precise, makeup deliberate, smile deployed like a tool. She assessed the situation in one glance. Brock at the stand, black woman in a hoodie, empty dining room behind them, and made her calculation. Is everything all right here? Table for one, Brock said. I told her we're booked. Vivian turned the smile on Opal. It was the same smile she'd give a child who wandered into the wrong classroom, patient, pitying, already guiding them toward the exit. I'm sorry, but we do enforce a dress standard here. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere else on the riverfront? The words were polite, the meaning was not. Could you show me the written policy? Opal's voice was level. No edge, no challenge, just a question. I'd like to review the specific language. The request caught Vivian off guard. Her smile held, but something behind it shifted. The faintest crack in porcelain. People who were being turned away didn't usually ask for documentation. They argued. They left. They didn't ask to see the specific language. The policy is posted at the entrance. You passed it on the way in. I read it. Opal turned slightly, gesturing toward the brass-framed sign by the door without taking her eyes off Vivian. It prohibits athletic wear, swimwear, and clothing with offensive graphics. My hoodie is none of those. My jeans aren't listed. My sneakers aren't listed. Could you tell me which specific provision of your posted policy my clothes violate? Silence. The dining room hum continued behind them. A server passed through the hallway carrying a tray of cocktails and didn't make eye contact. It's at management's discretion, Vivian's voice cooled by 2 degrees. And I'm management. I understand. Could I have your full name and the corporate contact information for your franchise group? I'd like to provide feedback through the appropriate channel. Another crack. Vivian's jaw tightened for half a second before the professional mask snapped back into place. My name is Vivian. The restaurant's contact information is on our website. She didn't offer a last name, a business card, or a corporate phone number. She offered a wall. Is there a comment card or a formal complaint process I can access here on site? We don't have comment cards. If you'd like to leave feedback, as I said, your website doesn't have a complaint form. I checked before coming in tonight. The silence that followed was different from the first one. This wasn't a pause. This was Vivian Tate realizing that the woman in the gray hoodie had done homework, that she hadn't wandered in off the street on impulse, that she'd checked the website, read the posted policy, and was now asking questions that had specific, documentable answers. Brock shifted his weight. His arms unfolded, and his right hand moved to his hip, resting near the radio clipped to his belt. A small gesture, but loaded. The body language of someone preparing to escalate. Opal noticed. She always noticed. Thank you for your time, she said. She opened the leather notebook, wrote something without looking down, the pen moving in short, practiced strokes, and closed it. Then she turned, walked past the brass-framed sign, and stepped out through the front door into the warm Savannah night. She paused on the sidewalk, looked back through the restaurant's front windows. Every table she could see was occupied. Every face she could see was white. She wrote one more line in the notebook, underlined it twice, and walked away. Inside, Vivian exhaled, straightened her blazer, turned to Brock with a look that blended annoyance and satisfaction. "Some people just don't understand the concept of an upscale dining experience," she said. It wasn't quite an insult. It was worse. It was a category dismissal, the kind that transforms a human being into a type, a problem, a thing to be managed. Brock grunted. "Want me to flag her if she comes back?" "She won't come back. She was wrong." Narrator. 2 days later. Saturday evening, Opal returned. This time she wore different clothes. Black slacks, a navy blouse, low-heeled flats, business casual. Hairstyled, still no jewelry, but the overall impression was different. Professional, appropriate by any reasonable standard, the kind of outfit that would get you through the door of any restaurant in America without a second glance. She'd made the shift deliberately, not to comply with Vivian Tate's unwritten rules, but to test them. If she was seated in business casual, it would prove that Thursday's refusal wasn't about clothes. It was about something the posted policy couldn't admit. The host was different. Not Brock, a younger woman with a practiced smile who checked the walk-in list and seated Opal at a two-top in the main dining room without hesitation. The table was fine. Central location, good sight line to the kitchen corridor and the host stand. Opal sat down, ordered iced tea, and watched. Over the next 90 minutes, she observed every interaction within her line of sight. She didn't stare. She ate a salad and a bowl of soup and sipped her tea and appeared to anyone looking like a woman dining alone with her thoughts. But the leather notebook was open beside her plate, and the pen moved at intervals that corresponded exactly to the events unfolding around her. 7:42 p.m., a black family of 4, father, mother, 2 children under 10, entered the restaurant. Father in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt, mother in a sundress. Children clean and well-behaved. The young hostess checked the book, then disappeared into the back. She returned with Brock Henley, who had apparently been off the floor. Brock looked at the family, looked at the book, and told them there was a 45-minute wait. 7:48 p.m. A white couple entered. No reservation. He wore cargo shorts and a wrinkled polo. She wore yoga pants and sandals. Brock checked the book and seated them immediately. At a window table, the best in the house. 6 minutes apart. Same book. Different outcomes. Opal wrote it down. Both timestamps, both descriptions. The wait time quoted. The immediate seating. The table assignment. 8:03 p.m. Her server arrived. The name on the receipt would later confirm her identity. Jocelyn Keene, according to the small print at the bottom of the check. She was mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back tight, and she set the menu down on the table without making eye contact. Not a toss, not a slam, just a placement that managed to communicate indifference without crossing any line that could be formally reported. "I'll give you a minute," Jocelyn said, and was gone before Opal could respond. Opal already had her order ready. She'd studied the menu online. She waited. Jocelyn did not return for 22 minutes. During those 22 minutes, Opal watched Jocelyn serve 3 other tables. Table 14, a white couple, received drink orders within 2 minutes of seating. Table 11, another white couple, received appetizers, a wine recommendation, and a detailed description of the evening's specials. Table 9, a mixed-race couple, received service somewhere in between. Professional, but without the warmth lavished on tables 11 and 14. When Jocelyn finally returned, Opal ordered without comment. "The wedge salad and the pan-roasted salmon. And I'd like to keep my iced tea refilled, please." Jocelyn wrote it down without looking at her. "Anything else? Is there a comment card or a guest satisfaction survey available? I'd like to provide feedback about my experience." Something flickered across Jocelyn's face. Not guilt, recognition. The recognition of a script that had been activated before, Someone had asked this question recently, or someone had warned the staff that questions like this might be coming. I can get the manager for you. I'd prefer a written feedback channel if one exists. I'll check. Jocelyn disappeared toward the back of the house. She returned 4 minutes later with a white card, small, postcard-sized, with the Copper Table's logo at the top and 4 lines for handwritten comments. No corporate address, no email, no phone number, just a box at the bottom that read, "Return to host stand. All feedback is reviewed by management." Management. Vivian Tate, the fox guarding the henhouse. Opal took the card, wrote nothing on it, slid it into her notebook. Evidence that the only feedback mechanism available routed directly back to the person she was documenting. No independent review. No corporate oversight. A closed loop. At 8:27 p.m., the Black family she'd been tracking returned to Opal's field of vision. They'd waited there 45 minutes. They were now seated, at the worst table in the restaurant, wedged between the service corridor and the restroom hallway. The children sat quietly, well-behaved, while the father studied a menu he'd had to wait 45 minutes to read. The mother was looking at her phone. Opal could see the screen from 3 tables away. She was writing a review. The mother caught Opal's eye. They shared a look that lasted less than a second, but communicated everything. The exhaustion of being tolerated, the anger of being managed, the bone-deep weariness of dining while Black in a city that advertised its hospitality on every tour bus and guidebook. Opal added the family's table number and seating time to her notes. Then she noticed something else. Brock Henley had positioned himself in the hallway near the family's table, not standing still. He moved, slowly, adjusting a picture frame that didn't need adjusting, checking a thermostat that didn't need checking. But his body was oriented toward the family's table, surveillance disguised as maintenance. He did this for 11 minutes before moving back to the host stand. At 8:41, the father got up to take one of the children to the restroom. On his way back, he accidentally brushed against a server carrying a tray of drinks. Nothing spilled. A minor contact in a crowded restaurant, the kind of thing that happens 20 times a night without anyone noticing. But Brock noticed. He materialized from the host stand in 6 seconds flat, crossing the dining room like a man responding to an emergency instead of a toddler bumping into a waiter. "Sir, I'm going to need you to be careful with my staff." His voice was loud enough that 4 neighboring tables heard it. The father, a man in pressed khakis who'd done nothing except take his child to the bathroom, looked stunned. "It was an accident. I understand. But we take our staff's safety seriously." Brock's hands were on his hips. His body was angled to block the father's path back to his table, a physical wall constructed from authority and muscle mass. The mother stood up from her seat. "Excuse me, we've been waiting nearly an hour. We're seated next to the bathroom, and now you're—" "Ma'am, please sit down. I'm handling this." "You're handling what? My husband walked our son to the restroom." Brock raised one hand, palm out, a stop gesture aimed at the mother like a traffic cop halting a vehicle. "I need both of you to lower your voices, or I'll have to ask you to leave." The dining room had gone quiet. 40 faces, all white except for the family being addressed and Opal watching from her bar seat, turned toward the scene. The father put his hand on his wife's shoulder, not to silence her, but to steady her. The children looked confused. The younger one started to cry. Brock stepped back. The threat was delivered. The family sat down. The dining room murmur resumed. But the damage was done. The family had been publicly disciplined for the crime of existing in a space that tolerated their money but not their presence. Opal wrote it all down. Time, description. Brock's exact words, as close to verbatim as her rapid shorthand could capture. The father's reaction, the mother's response, the child crying, the 40 white faces watching. She finished her meal. The food was excellent, which made everything else worse, because it meant the Copper Table wasn't failing, it was choosing who to welcome and who to reject. Choosing who received attentive service and who waited 22 minutes for a drink order. Choosing which families got window tables and which got told to wait 45 minutes. The bill came to $63. She paid with a credit card, this time intentionally, creating a paper trail that placed her at this location on this date, and left a $20 cash tip on the table, because undertipping would give Jocelyn a grievance and she needed the receipt to be unremarkable. On her way out, she paused at the host stand. Brock was there. He didn't recognize her. Different clothes, different approach, different energy. She was invisible now, dressed in the costume of someone who belonged. "Excuse me, I noticed a family was told there's a 45-minute wait earlier. Are you still running behind?" Brock glanced at the book. "We've been pretty smooth tonight, actually. Must have been a reservation overlap." It wasn't. But now she had his verbal confirmation that the wait time quoted to the Black family didn't reflect actual demand. One more data point. One more entry in the notebook. She walked out into the Savannah evening for the second time, and for the second time, the restaurant returned to normal behind her as if she'd never existed. But this time, she had timestamps. Server name, table numbers, wait time disparity, a comment card that proved the feedback system was rigged, and a credit card receipt that placed her inside the building with a dated record. Narrator. The following Tuesday, she came back for the third time, and this time everything changed. She'd made a reservation by phone. 7:30 p.m., party of 1, dining room table. The confirmation number was documented in her notebook, along with the date and time of the call, the name of the person who took it, a host named Gabby, and the exact words used. "You're confirmed for 7:30, dining room, party of 1. See you Tuesday." She wore the gray hoodie again, deliberately. The same jeans, the same canvas sneakers. She wanted to see what happened when a customer with a confirmed reservation arrived in clothes that had gotten her turned away 6 days earlier. The answer came within 30 seconds. Brock was at the host stand. He recognized her this time. She could see it in the way his posture changed, shoulders squaring, chin dropping. The subtle physical reset of a man preparing for confrontation. Name? Sadler. 7:30 reservation. He looked at the screen. She watched his eyes. They found her name, registered it, and then moved to the seating chart. His finger hovered over the screen for a moment, then tapped. "I've got you at the bar." "My reservation was for a dining room table. The confirmation specified dining room seating. We don't typically hold prime tables for single diners during peak hours." He said it like he was quoting a rule. He wasn't. There was no such rule, and she knew it because she read the entire reservation policy on the restaurant's booking platform, which made no distinction between party sizes for table assignments. "Is that a written policy?" "It's standard practice." "Could I see it in writing?" Brock didn't respond. He picked up a menu, stepped out from behind the host stand, and walked toward the bar without looking back. An invitation to follow, framed as the only option. Opal followed. She sat at the bar, opened her notebook, wrote, "Reservation confirmation number X, reserved, dining room table, actual seating, bar. Reason given, standard practice for single diners. No written policy produced." The bartender was professional. A young black man named Devin, according to his name tag, who served her iced tea with a genuine smile and didn't seem bothered by her hoodie or her notebook or her solitude. A small kindness in an unkind building. 15 minutes later, Vivian Tate appeared. She didn't approach from the front. She came from behind, walking along the bar, pausing at the service station to speak with Devin in a low voice, then continuing toward Opal with the deliberate pace of someone who wants to be seen arriving. A power move, a territorial display. "You've been here before." It wasn't a question. "I liked the menu. I came back." "Thursday evening. You asked for a table and didn't meet our dress standard." Vivian's voice was controlled, but underneath the control was something harder. Irritation compressed into professionalism. "Now you're back. I have a reservation tonight. Confirmed for 7:30, dining room table. I was seated at the bar instead. I'd like to understand why." "Seating is at the host's discretion. Your dress code is at management's discretion. Your seating is at the host's discretion. Is there anything in this restaurant that operates according to a written, consistent standard?" The question landed in a way Opal hadn't entirely intended. Or maybe she had. Vivian's jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed. The professional mask didn't drop, but it thinned. And what showed through the cracks was not embarrassment or self-reflection. It was anger. "I'm going to be direct with you." Vivian's voice dropped to a register meant to be heard only by the two of them. "You're making my staff uncomfortable. Whatever you're doing with that notebook, it needs to stop. I'm a customer taking notes about my dining experience. That's not prohibited by any policy I've seen. Give me the notebook." Vivian extended her hand. Palm up, fingers open, the gesture of a school principal confiscating a phone. "No. This is my restaurant. If you're recording information about my staff, my tables, I'm a private citizen in a public accommodation writing in my own personal notebook. You have no right to take it." Vivian looked past Opal. A small nod, barely perceptible, the kind of signal that passes between people who've coordinated before. Preston Gale appeared from behind the bar, moving quickly, and reached across the counter for the leather notebook. Opal's hand came down on it first. Firm, flat, covering the page. Preston's fingers closed on the edge of the cover and pulled. The notebook slid an inch across the bar before Opal's grip held. "Let go of my property," she said. Preston pulled harder. The notebook's spine creased under the tension. Opal didn't let go, but the force was enough to drag her forward, the edge of the bar pressing into her ribs. She braced her free hand against the counter and held. Devon, the bartender, stepped back from the service station. His eyes were wide. "Let go." Preston's voice was strained with the effort of trying to look authoritative while engaged in a tug-of-war with a customer over a notebook. Opal released the notebook. Not because he'd won, because she'd realized that the only thing inside it was today's notes, and today's notes were already stored in her phone's voice memo. The notebook was a decoy. The real data was backed up. Preston stumbled backward with the notebook, nearly dropping it. He recovered, opened it, and flipped through the pages. His face changed as he read. Date after date, observation after observation, the meticulous shorthand of someone who'd been watching and recording for weeks. "What is this?" He held the notebook up toward Vivian. "My personal property, which you just took from me by force." Opal's voice carried across the bar now, loud enough for Devon and the couple 2 seats down to hear. "In front of witnesses." Vivian's composure flickered. She took the notebook from Preston, glanced at the pages, then set it on the bar between them. "Take your notebook and leave." Opal picked it up, checked the spine, creased but intact. She slid it into her bag. "I didn't say it was prohibited. I said it's making people uncomfortable. And when my staff is uncomfortable, my guests don't get the experience they deserve. Your other guests, not me." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the restaurant. Vivian stared at Opal. Opal looked back without expression. Not defiance, not submission. Observation. The way a scientist looks at a specimen that has just confirmed a hypothesis. Vivian turned and walked away. She didn't say goodnight. She didn't offer to move Opal to the dining room. She just left, heels clicking on the hardwood floor, back rigid with the particular fury of someone who has been outmaneuvered in a game she didn't know she was playing. This is where things start to escalate fast. If you're watching, hit that like button right now. You're going to want to see what happens next. Narrator. Opal didn't leave that night. She stayed at the bar for another hour, eating a dinner she barely tasted, watching the restaurant operate around her like a machine designed to include and exclude with surgical precision. Devon, the bartender, kept her iced tea full and didn't ask questions. The couple 2 seats down, white, mid-50s, regulars by the look of it, glanced at her once and didn't glance again. The dining room hummed with conversation and laughter and the clink of expensive glassware, and she sat outside all of it, inside the building, but outside the community it was built to serve. At 9:12 p.m., she paid her bill, tipped Devon 30% in cash, and walked toward the front door. She didn't make it. Jocelyn Keene intercepted her at the hallway between the bar and the foyer, a narrow corridor lined with framed reviews and awards, just out of sight of the dining room. Jocelyn wasn't alone. Preston Gale, the assistant manager, stood behind her with a clipboard and the expression of a man who'd been given a task he didn't fully understand but intended to execute with authority. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you before you leave," Preston said. His voice carried the clipped precision of someone quoting a procedure. "There's been a report of a missing item from the dining area." Opal stopped. "What kind of item?" "A silver salt cellar from table 7. A staff member observed you in the vicinity of that table earlier this evening." She hadn't been near table 7. She'd been at the bar the entire time. The only place she'd walked was the corridor to the restroom, which was in the opposite direction. "I haven't been near table 7. Near. I've been seated at the bar since 7:35. Devon can confirm that." Preston didn't acknowledge this. "I'm going to need to ask you to open your bag." "On what basis?" "We have a report of missing property, and we have a responsibility to our—" "You have a report. You don't have probable cause. You're not law enforcement, and you have no legal authority to search my personal belongings." She said it the way someone reads a statement they've memorized. Not because she was reciting, but because the words were so deeply known they came out polished, automatic, precise. Jocelyn, standing slightly behind Preston, had her arms crossed and her chin elevated. The posture of a person who has already decided the outcome and is waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. "I saw her near the salt cellars," Jocelyn said. Not to Opal, to Preston, as if Opal wasn't standing right there. "When she went to the restroom, she paused at table 7. "I didn't pause at table 7. The restroom is in the opposite direction." "I know what I saw." The corridor was narrow. The lighting was warm but insufficient. And suddenly, the situation wasn't about a salt cellar anymore. It was about a black woman in a hoodie being accused of theft by a white server in a restaurant that had already refused her service twice, and the assistant manager was siding with the accuser without asking a single follow-up question. Footsteps behind her. Heavy. Familiar. Brock Henley appeared at the end of the corridor, filling it edge to edge like a cork in a bottle. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, blocking the path to the front door, arms at his sides but fists loosely clenched. "Ma'am, I need you to open your bag." This time, it was Brock, and his tone was different from Preston's. Not procedural, but physical. A command backed by the implicit threat of what happens if you don't comply. "I've already said no. You have no authority to search me. If you believe a theft has occurred, call the police. They can investigate. We don't need police to handle our own restaurant. If you're accusing me of theft, you absolutely do." Brock stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell his aftershave and see the vein pulsing in his neck. He reached for the strap of her canvas bag. Not asking, taking. Opal pulled the bag back. Not aggressively. A firm, controlled motion. One hand on the strap, one step backward, weight shifting to her back foot, a move that protected her property without escalating the physical dynamic. But Brock didn't interpret it that way. He grabbed her arm, left arm, just above the elbow, fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. He pulled her toward him with the casual force of a man who moves people for a living and has forgotten that moving people against their will has a legal name. She broke the grip. A simple defensive motion, rotating her arm inward and down, leveraging his thumb as the weakest point of his grasp. No punch, no strike, no theatrical martial arts. Just body mechanics taught to anyone who's been trained in personal safety. His hand came free and his own momentum carried him half a step forward, off balance for a fraction of a second. He recovered fast, too fast. His hand shot out again. Not for her arm this time, but for the strap of her bag, yanking it off her shoulder with enough force to spin her sideways into the corridor wall. Her back hit the framed reviews. Glass cracked behind her, a sharp sound that cut through the ambient restaurant noise. A piece of the frame fell to the floor. Jocelyn gasped. Preston said something. "Brock, that's enough." But his voice was thin, a man who knew he should intervene and lacked the physical courage to try. Opal caught her balance against the wall. Her shoulder throbbed where it had struck the frame. The bag lay on the floor between them, its contents half spilled, wallet, notebook, pen rolling in a slow arc across the hardwood. Brock grabbed the bag and upended it. Everything tumbled out. Keys, phone, tissues, granola bar, the leather notebook landing open to a page dense with handwriting. He kicked through the items with his boot, scattering them, looking for a silver salt cellar that didn't exist. "Where is it?" His voice was raw now, stripped of professional pretense. This wasn't security protocol. This was a man who'd been given permission to be violent by a woman who'd decided that the rules didn't apply to certain people. Opal didn't answer. She crouched slowly, keeping her eyes on Brock, and began picking up her belongings. The phone had a crack across the screen. The notebook's cover was scuffed from the floor. She gathered each item with deliberate calm, placing them back in the bag one at a time. Brock slapped the bag out of her hands. The sound was sharp, palm against canvas, the kind of impact that echoes in a narrow space. The bag hit the wall and dropped again. Opal's hand, which had been holding the strap, went red from the contact. "I told you to open the bag, not pick it up. And I told you that you're not law enforcement." Her voice didn't waver, didn't rise, didn't do any of the things his voice was doing. "You have no authority to search me, detain me, or touch me. Everything that has happened in this corridor in the last 90 seconds is documented." She tapped her phone, which was still recording despite the cracked screen, "and constitutes assault and battery under Georgia Code section Moi Sao Get Noi, Num Get Noi, Hai Mui Ba." The statute number hung in the air like a warning flare. "Do not touch me again," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It dropped, lower, harder, weighted with something that made Brock hesitate for the first time since he'd walked into the corridor. Not fear, something else. The recognition that the person he was trying to intimidate wasn't intimidated, and that the gap between those two states was dangerous. "That's it," Brock said. He straightened up, rolled his shoulders, and pointed at the front door. "You're leaving, now! You're trespassing, and if you're not out that door in 10 seconds, I'm calling the cops myself." "Please do." Opal held his gaze. "I'd like an officer present to document what just happened. You grabbed my arm without my consent. That's battery under Georgia law." The word battery changed the air in the corridor. Preston took a half step back. Jocelyn's arms uncrossed. Brock's jaw worked, grinding options between his teeth. "Get out," he said, quieter now but harder. "Get out of this restaurant." Opal walked past him. He didn't touch her again. She moved through the foyer, past the brass-framed sign, past the hostess who had watched the entire exchange from behind the stand and said nothing, and out through the front door into the Savannah night. On the sidewalk, she set her bag down, took a breath. One long inhale through the nose, held for 3 seconds, released through the mouth. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Savannah Chatham 911. What is your emergency?" "My name is Opal Sadler. I'm standing outside the Copper Table restaurant on Bull Street. I was physically assaulted by a staff member, grabbed by the arm and forcibly removed from the building after a false accusation of theft. I'd like an officer to come to my location to document the incident." "Are you injured, ma'am?" "I have bruising forming on my left arm where I was grabbed. No other injuries." "Is the person who assaulted you still in the building?" "Yes, he's the head of security. His name is Brock Henley." "Are you in a safe location?" "I'm on the public sidewalk outside the front entrance. I'm safe." "I'm dispatching an officer to your location. Stay on the line if you'd like, or I can call you back." "I'll stay on the line." "Dispatch ID 7432. Call received at 9:21 p.m. Duration of call, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. Caller was calm, articulate, and provided all requested information without prompting. No raised voice, no emotional language, just facts, delivered in order, like a person reading from a report she'd already written in her head. 2 patrol units arrived within 8 minutes. Officers, Denham and Witt. Both had body cams activated. Opal noted the small green lights on their chest-mounted units as they approached. "Ma'am, we received a call about an assault. Can you tell us what happened?" She told them, chronologically, with timestamps, with names, with the specific sequence of events, the accusation of theft, the demand to search her bag, her refusal on the grounds that restaurant staff lack legal authority to conduct searches, Brock's physical grab, her defensive response, and her removal from the premises. Officer Denham took notes. Officer Witt went inside. Witt returned 12 minutes later. I spoke with the manager and 2 staff members. The manager, a Ms. Tate, says you were asked to leave due to disruptive behavior. The server, a Ms. Keene, says she observed you near a table where an item went missing. The security officer, Mr. Henley, says you became aggressive when he asked you to leave. Did they produce the missing salt cellar? Witt paused. No, they couldn't locate the item in question. Did they check the table? Is it actually missing? Another pause. The manager said she'd look into it. So there's no confirmation that anything was stolen, no evidence of theft. And I was physically grabbed, accused, and removed based on one server's claim that she saw me near a table I never approached. Opal pulled up her phone. I have the 911 recording and a voice memo that started recording when I entered the corridor where the confrontation occurred. I'm consenting voluntarily to a search of my bag. You'll find no salt cellar and no stolen property of any kind. She opened the bag herself, held it out. Denham looked through it with gloved hands. Wallet, keys, phone, leather notebook, pen, a packet of tissues, a granola bar, no salt cellar, nothing that didn't belong to her. Denham noted it in his report. No stolen items found. I'd like to file a formal incident report, Opal said. I'd also like to note for the record that I was denied service on Thursday evening based on dress code enforcement that doesn't appear consistent with the restaurant's posted policy, and that tonight's theft accusation appears retaliatory. This is the 3rd time I've visited this restaurant. The first time, I was turned away. The second time, I was served but experienced significant service delays. Tonight, I was accused of theft and physically removed. Denham nodded. Wrote it all down. Badge number 478, Savannah Chatham Metropolitan Police. Case number assigned. Body cam timestamp, 9:53 p.m. Do you want to pursue assault charges against Mr. Henley? I want to file the report and have it on record. I'll consult with my attorney about next steps. Understood. You'll receive a copy of the incident report by mail within 5 business days. Is there anything else we can help with tonight? No. Thank you, officers. They left. The patrol cars pulled away. Opal stood on the sidewalk for another minute, alone. Then she opened her notebook and wrote the final entry for the evening. Case number, badge numbers, body cam confirmation, officers' names, and a note. No stolen property found. False accusation documented. Physical contact documented. All on body cam. She closed the notebook, walked to her car, drove home. Inside the copper table, Vivian Tate stood in the corridor where the confrontation had occurred, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low and controlled, but her hand was shaking. Graham, we may have a situation. A customer is filing a police report. She was a problem. Kept coming back, taking notes, asking questions. Jocelyn saw her near a missing item and we had Brock escort her out. The police came and didn't find anything in her bag, but she's claiming assault and discrimination and... A pause. She listened. No, I don't think she'll take it further. She's nobody. She was wearing a hoodie. She doesn't have the resources to... She stopped, listened again. Yes, I'll send you a summary in the morning. But Graham, I want to be clear. My staff followed protocol. The dress code is consistently enforced. The theft report was made in good faith. If she tries to make this into something bigger... Another pause, longer. Fine. I'll document everything on our end. Good night. She hung up, stood in the corridor for a moment. The restaurant was still busy, dishes clattering, guests laughing, the machinery of service running smoothly as if nothing had happened, as if a woman hadn't been grabbed, accused, removed, and humiliated in this very hallway 20 minutes ago. Vivian straightened her blazer, smoothed her hair, and walked back into the dining room wearing the same practiced smile she'd worn all evening. Narrator. The next morning, at her kitchen table at 6:51 a.m., Opal Sadler began organizing the evidence. The manila folder was gone. In its place, a filing system. 3 folders, color-coded, red for incidents, blue for documentation, green for the materials she didn't discuss with anyone. She spread the red folder's contents across the table in chronological order and reviewed each piece. First, the voice memo from Thursday. She played it on her phone, listening through a single earbud while she wrote a transcript in longhand. Vivian Tate's voice, clear despite the ambient noise. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere else on the riverfront. Her own voice. Could you show me the written policy? Vivian's refusal. It's at management's discretion, and I'm management.
Duration 2 minutes 47 seconds. No interruptions, no distortion, no gaps. Second, the dining receipt from Saturday. The copper table, Bull Street, Savannah, GA. Date, time, table number, bar seat 3, not the dining room table she'd reserved, but the bar, which was itself a data point. Server, J. Keen. Items, wedge salad, pan-roasted salmon, iced tea, nyan ba. Total, $30 $. Subtotal, tax, tip left in cash. The receipt was a record of presence, proof she'd been there, been served, been a customer. Third, the reservation confirmation. Made by phone, Tuesday, confirmed for 7:30 p.m., dining room, party of 1. The booking platform's automated email confirmation, printed and stapled to a handwritten note. Called, phone number. Spoke to, Gabby.
Confirmed dining room. Actual seating, bar. The discrepancy was documented. Fourth, the 911 dispatch log. She'd requested a copy through the Savannah-Chatham PD's public records portal that morning at 6:20 a.m., within minutes of it being available. Dispatch ID 7432. Date, time, 9:21 p.m. Call duration, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. Caller, Opal Sadler. Nature, assault report, false theft accusation. Officers dispatched, Denham, badge 478. Witt, badge 391. Responding time, 8 minutes. Disposition, report taken, no charges filed at scene, no stolen property recovered. Fifth, a reference note, not a document she possessed yet, but a placeholder for what she knew existed. Bodycam footage. Officers Denham and Witt, both units activated. Timestamps from 9:53 p.m. onward. She hadn't requested the footage yet. Georgia Open Records Act, OCGA section. Namuigat noi muitamgat noi bay muimot, allows for requests, but processing takes time. She'd file the request today. She stacked the documents in order, returned them to the red folder, and moved to the blue folder. The blue folder contained something different. Not incidents, but patterns. A spreadsheet, handwritten, because she preferred ink to screens for certain kinds of analysis, with columns for date, time, business name, type of incident, service denial, differential treatment, surveillance, following, verbal hostility, personnel involved, and a final column labeled pattern indicator with codes only she could read.
The spreadsheet covered all 7 businesses she'd visited during her first week in Savannah's historic district. But one business had more entries than all the others combined: the copper table. 3 visits, 5 personnel involved, 12 discrete incidents of differential treatment, ranging from service denial to physical assault. A pattern so clear it barely needed the spreadsheet to see it. But patterns weren't proof. Patterns were narratives waiting for data to confirm them. And data was what the green folder contained. She didn't open the green folder that morning. Instead, she sat back, poured her second cup of coffee, and composed an email. The header read, to corporateacongcoppertablegroup.com. From her personal email. Date, Wednesday, date.
Subject, formal complaint, racial discrimination and false theft accusation, Bull Street location, Savannah, GA. The body of the email was precise. 3 paragraphs, no emotional language, no adjectives. Just facts, dates, times, names, incident descriptions, police case number, and a request for response within 10 business days, per the Copper Table Group's Guest Relations Policy, Section Bon Cham Hai. a provision she quoted from a printed document sitting beside her keyboard, underlining the relevant clause with a yellow highlighter. She attached 3 items: the voice memo, audio file, the dining receipt, photograph, and the police incident number, typed reference. She did not attach the reservation confirmation, the observation notes, or the pattern spreadsheet. Those she kept. The email went out at 7:33 a.m. Then she opened a new tab and drafted a second email, this one to a different address. The recipient's name was not visible in the draft, only initials. The subject line read, Phase 2, documentation complete, ready to proceed. She read it once, deleted it, started over, read the second version, sent it. At 7:41 a.m., her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID, answered. Miss Sadler. The voice on the other end was male, formal, and carried the particular weight of someone who uses last names as a form of respect rather than distance. I received your email. Are you comfortable with the timeline? I want one more piece before we move. The body cam footage. I'm filing the open records request today. That could take 2 to 4 weeks. I know. I've waited longer for less. A pause. Do you want me to schedule the Article 7 review? Not yet. I need 1 more week of documentation. When I bring this forward, I want it airtight. Understood. Keep me posted. She hung up. Set the phone on the table beside the blue folder. Drank her coffee. Stared at the wall for exactly 15 seconds. Not thinking, but resetting. Clearing the emotional residue of what she'd experienced so it wouldn't contaminate the analytical work ahead. Then she opened her laptop and filed the Georgia Open Records Act request for body cam footage from the Savannah-Chatham Metropolitan Police Department. Case number referenced. Officers' names and badge numbers provided.
Specific timestamps requested: 9:53 p.m. through 10:22 p.m. Format: digital video file. The form asks for the requester's relationship to the case. She checked complainant, gacheo, victim. 5 days later, the response came from the Copper Table Group's corporate office. Not a phone call, not a meeting request, an email. From M. Chum Ferris, A. Kong Copper Table Group, Chum Com. To Opal's email. Date, Monday, date. Subject, R.E. Formal complaint, discrimination and false theft accusation. Dear Ms. Sadler, thank you for reaching out to the Copper Table Group. We take all guest feedback seriously and are committed to providing an exceptional dining experience for everyone. After consulting with the management team at our Savannah location, we believe this was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Our dress code is applied consistently to all guests, and our staff acted in good faith regarding the incident in question. We are sorry you felt unwelcome and hope you will give us another opportunity to demonstrate the hospitality for which the Copper Table is known. Regards, Malcolm Ferris, Regional Director, Southeast Division, the Copper Table Group. Opal read the email 3 times. No investigation mentioned, no follow-up questions, no request for the voice memo or the police case number she'd provided, no acknowledgement of the physical assault, no acknowledgement of the false theft accusation, no acknowledgement of the 911 call or the police report. A form letter, the corporate equivalent of a shrug. She printed it, highlighted 3 phrases: unfortunate misunderstanding, applied consistently to all guests, and acted in good faith. Each one a lie she could disprove with documents already in her possession. She placed the printout in the red folder and wrote a single line in her notebook. Corporate dismissal, no investigation, pattern of institutional protection confirmed. That afternoon, she received a second piece of mail, this one physical. A certified letter, signature required, delivered by a postal carrier who waited while she signed. The return address was the Copper Table, Bull Street, Savannah, GA. Inside, a single page on restaurant letterhead. Dear Ms. Dear Sadler, you are hereby notified that you are banned from entering any Copper Table location, effective immediately. Any future entry will be considered criminal trespass under Georgia Code Section Muy Sauget Noi Beget Noi Hai Muy Mot and prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
This action is taken in response to disruptive conduct, staff complaints, and an ongoing investigation into missing property. Signed, Vivian Tate, General Manager. Opal read the letter standing in her doorway, afternoon light falling across the paper. She read it once for content and once for legal analysis. Georgia Code Section Moi Sao Gat Noi, Bay Get Noi Hai Mui Mot. Criminal trespass. A real statute. The letter was technically functional. It created the notice element that the statute requires for a trespass prosecution. If she entered any copper table location after receiving this letter, they could have her arrested. It was a legal weapon disguised as a management decision, but it was also an admission. The letter referenced disruptive conduct, which consisted of asking questions and taking notes. It referenced staff complaints, which consisted of Jocelyn's fabricated theft accusation. And it referenced an ongoing investigation into missing property, an investigation the police had already resolved by finding nothing. She filed the letter in the red folder. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and made a phone call. I just received a trespass ban from the copper table, signed by Vivian Tate. The voice on the other end, the same voice that had called her Ms. Sadler with deference, was quiet for a moment. They banned you from your own restaurant. They don't know it's my restaurant. That's the point. Another pause. When do you want to move? Opal looked at the folders on her table. Red, blue, green. Incidents, patterns, and the documents no one else had seen yet. She looked at the trespass ban letter, still sitting on top of the stack, Vivian Tate's signature bold and confident at the bottom. Schedule the compliance hearing, 2 weeks from today, Atlanta, full review under Article 7. Lorraine will need the complete file. She'll have it by Friday. And the body cam footage? Request is in. Processing time is 2 to 4 weeks. We don't wait for it. We proceed with what we have. And what we have is more than enough. She hung up, set the phone down, looked at the 3 folders. Then she opened the green folder for the first time that day and reviewed its contents: the franchise agreement, the audit protocols, the financial projections, and the document that would, in 2 weeks, change everything. Section Muihai Chambon. Franchisee retains the right to conduct unannounced compliance audits of any franchised location, including but not limited to operations, personnel conduct, and adherence to brand standards. She'd been the one to negotiate that clause. 18 months ago, sitting across a conference table from the Copper Table Group's legal team, she'd insisted on language that gave her the right to walk into any of her 6 locations without warning and without identification, and observe how her business was being run. They'd agreed because they assumed she'd never use it. Franchise owners didn't do their own audits. They hired consultants. They reviewed reports. They trusted their general managers. But Opal Sadler didn't trust reports. She trusted data she collected herself, evidence she gathered with her own hands, patterns she observed with her own eyes. And the data from the Copper Table's Bull Street location told a story that no consultant's report would ever capture, because consultants announced themselves, dressed the part, and saw what management wanted them to see. She'd seen what management didn't want anyone to see, and in 2 weeks, she was going to show it to them. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, you're going to want to be here for part 2. Tap subscribe and turn on that notification bell right now, because the reveal is coming, and it's going to change everything. Narrator. But that reveal was still 2 weeks away. And in those 2 weeks, the machinery of institutional protection would begin to turn, not because the Copper Table knew what was coming, but because institutions protect themselves instinctively, the way an immune system attacks a foreign body before identifying what it is. The first sign came 3 days after the trespass ban. Opal's attorney, Lorraine Estes, a civil rights and employment lawyer based in Atlanta with 15 years of experience and a reputation for meticulous preparation, called at 8:14 a.m. I just received a cease and desist from the Copper Table Group's legal counsel, a Miles Winthrop, out of their Atlanta headquarters. He's demanding that you withdraw your complaint, delete the voice memo, and refrain from further contact with any Copper Table employee or location. On what grounds? Defamation. He claims your complaint contains false statements that have damaged the restaurant's reputation and caused emotional distress to staff members. Every statement in my complaint is documented. I have a voice memo, a police report, and a body cam reference. I know, which means this cease and desist isn't about winning a defamation case, it's about intimidation. They want you to go away. I'm not going away. I didn't think so. I'll draft a response citing the documented evidence and confirming that your complaint was made in good faith based on personally observed events. We'll also note that retaliatory legal threats against a consumer exercising complaint rights may constitute an unfair business practice under Georgia Code section Muy get noimot get noi ba chin ba. Do it. And Lorraine, start preparing the compliance hearing file. I want the full presentation ready in 10 days. How much are you planning to disclose? Everything. Narrator. The second sign came 5 days later, and it was worse. Opal had driven to Savannah's historic district for a morning of errands unrelated to the copper table. A genuine need for picture frames from a shop on Abercorn Street, a prescription pickup from the pharmacy on Drayton. She parked on a side street, locked her car, and walked toward the frame shop. She'd been inside for 4 minutes when she noticed the man standing outside. He wasn't subtle about it. Mid-40s, crew cut, aviator sunglasses, standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his jacket pockets, facing the frame shop's window, not browsing, not walking, standing, watching. She continued her shopping, chose 2 frames, paid, walked out. The man was gone. She crossed the street to the pharmacy, waited for her prescription, walked out. He was back. Same position, different angle, now across the street, leaning against a lamppost, same sunglasses, same jacket. Watching. Opal did not react. She walked to her car, drove 3 blocks, turned right, parked again, got out, walked into a coffee shop, sat at the window. He appeared on foot within 2 minutes, walking past the coffee shop slowly, glancing in, then continuing down the block. Not stopping, just confirming her location. She photographed him through the window. Time-stamped, low quality, but enough to document his presence and general description. White male, mid-40s, 5'10", medium build, gray jacket, crew cut, aviator sunglasses, no visible identification. She wrote the details in her notebook, including the 3 locations where she'd observed him and the timestamps. She stepped outside. The man was halfway down the block, back-turned, walking away with studied casualness. "Excuse me?" Opal's voice was clear, carrying across the sidewalk. "You've been following me for 40 minutes, 3 locations. If you have business with me, let's have it." He stopped, turned. The sunglasses hid his eyes, but not his surprise. His mouth tightened, jaw shifting. The body language of a man caught doing something he'd been told would be easy. He walked toward her, fast, closing the distance from 15 feet to 3 in a few strides, using his height and forward momentum to create a wall of physical presence. "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about." His voice was low, controlled, but his right hand came up and shoved her phone, which she'd raised to photograph him at close range, downward. His palm struck the back of her hand hard enough to sting, and the phone nearly dropped to the sidewalk. She caught it, stepped back. 2 tourists on the opposite sidewalk glanced over. A shopkeeper in a nearby doorway watched. "Don't touch me." She held the phone up again, camera facing him. "I'm on a public sidewalk. I have every right to photograph anyone in a public space." He stepped closer. His chest was 18 inches from hers. His hand came up again, this time reaching for the phone directly, fingers closing around the case. Opal twisted the phone away and stepped sideways, putting a parked car between them. The motion was smooth, practiced. The footwork of someone who'd been taught spatial awareness in environments more dangerous than a Savannah sidewalk. "I have your photograph. I have timestamps from 3 locations. If you follow me again, I'm calling the police." She held his gaze for 3 seconds, then turned and walked to her car without running. He didn't follow. But he stood on the sidewalk watching her drive away, and when she checked her rear-view mirror at the first intersection, he had his phone to his ear. Reporting back. To someone. Then she called Lorraine. "I'm being followed." "By who?" "I don't know. White male, not law enforcement. No badge, no radio, no standard positioning. He's maintaining visual contact but not approaching." "Private investigator?" "That's my assumption. Which means someone hired him. Which means someone is spending money to watch me. Vivian Tate doesn't have the authority to hire a PI on a restaurant manager's budget. That comes from corporate." "I know. This changes the calculus. If they're surveilling you, they're building a counter-narrative, probably looking for anything that discredits you. Prior complaints, social media, financial records, anything they can use to paint you as a professional litigant or a scam artist. They won't find anything. They don't need to find anything real. They just need something that creates doubt. Something a corporate attorney can wave in front of a mediator and say, 'See, she has a history of this.'" Opal was quiet for a moment. Through the coffee shop window, the street was empty. The man in the gray jacket was gone, or positioned somewhere she couldn't see him. "Move the hearing up," she said. "Next week." "That's tight. You'll have the file by tomorrow. Move the hearing to next week, before they have time to build whatever they're building." "I'll make the call." Opal hung up, finished her coffee, drove home using a route that took her past the copper table, not to stop, but to observe. The restaurant was open, lunch service in progress, the sidewalk out front busy with tourists. Vivian Tate's silver Audi was in the reserved spot. Brock Henley's black truck was in the employee lot behind the building. Everything looked normal. But normal was the mask that institutions wore while they prepared their defenses, and Opal knew from experience that the preparation happening behind that mask was anything but normal. Somewhere in an Atlanta office, Miles Winthrop was reviewing her complaint and calculating exposure. Somewhere in the same building, Malcolm Ferris was drafting talking points about consistent policy enforcement and good faith management decisions. Somewhere, someone had authorized a private investigator to follow a black woman through Savannah because she'd had the audacity to write things down in a notebook. The machinery was turning, the immune system was attacking, and Opal Sadler, the foreign body it was trying to expel, was about to show it exactly what she was made of. She drove home, parked in the driveway, sat in the car for 30 seconds, not thinking, not planning, just breathing. The leather notebook sat on the passenger seat, heavy with 6 weeks of dates and names and evidence that might change one restaurant, or might change nothing at all. She picked it up, walked inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened the green folder. The franchise agreement was on top, 18 months old, her signature on every page, her name on the ownership line, her company, Sadler Holdings, LLC, on the franchise grant, 6 locations, $12 million in combined valuation, and section Moi Hai Fabon, highlighted in yellow, the clause that gave her the right to do exactly what she'd been doing. Below the franchise agreement, the EEOC complaints, not hers, the employees. 5 complaints filed with the Savannah District Office of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission over the past 6 months by 3 servers, 1 host, and 1 line cook, all describing racial discrimination in scheduling, table assignments, tip distribution, and disciplinary actions at the Bull Street location. Opal hadn't filed these complaints. She'd learned about them through the complaint tracking system that corporate was required to maintain under the franchise agreement, a system she had access to as the franchise owner, though no one at the Bull Street location knew that. Below the EEOC complaints, the pattern analysis. 47 online reviews from the past 14 months. Yelp, Google, TripAdvisor. Each describing discriminatory treatment. Each posted by a black or brown patron. Each coded and tabulated on a spreadsheet that showed the pattern with mathematical clarity. Below the pattern analysis, the police report, the 911 log, the body cam request, the cease and desist letter, and the trespass ban. Below all of that, a single sheet of paper with the heading Compliance Hearing, Agenda, and 7 items listed below it. Opal reviewed each document in order. Then she began to pack them into 2 banker's boxes, one for the hearing presentation, one for backup copies she'd leave at Lorraine's office. The hearing was scheduled for next Tuesday, 8 days away, in a conference room at the Copper Table Group's Atlanta regional headquarters. They were expecting a mediation with a complaining customer, someone to apologize to, someone to pay off, someone to make go away. They had no idea who was coming through that door, and when they found out, when they saw the franchise agreement with her name on it, when they heard the EEOC complaints from their own employees, when they watched the reservation data that proved what the dress code really was, the apology would be the last thing on anyone's mind. Opal closed the green folder, placed it on top of the banker's box, aligned the edges. The coffee maker was cold. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the Savannah evening was settling in, moss and humidity and the distant sound of a freight train rolling through the rail yard south of town. She sat in the silence for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and typed a text message. Short, to someone whose name was saved without a last name. Tuesday, Atlanta. I'll need you there. The reply came in 11 seconds. I'll be there. We finished this. Opal set the phone down, looked at the banker's box, looked at the trespass ban letter still visible through the green folder's clear cover, Vivian Tate's signature bold at the bottom, banned from her own restaurant, by her own employee, for the crime of being black in a hoodie and writing things down in a notebook. Next Tuesday would change that. Not all of it. The system was too large, too entrenched, too practiced at protecting itself for one hearing to fix. But some of it, enough to matter, enough to prove that the woman in the gray hoodie wasn't nobody. She was the person who signed the checks, and she was about to start collecting receipts. Narrator, 8 days. That's how long the silence lasted between Opal Sadler's final phone call and the morning that would end careers, shatter assumptions, and send a tremor through the entire Copper Table franchise. A tremor that would be felt in boardrooms, courtrooms, and break rooms for months to come. During those 8 days, the machinery on both sides was turning. On the corporate side, Miles Winthrop, the Copper Table Group's general counsel, had been assembling his defense. He'd interviewed Vivian Tate by phone twice, both conversations documented in memos that would later be subpoenaed. He'd reviewed the dress code policy and found it, in his own written assessment to Malcolm Ferris, defensible but vague in ways that create litigation risk. He'd pulled Opal Sadler's consumer complaint file and marked it for what corporate attorneys call active management, which meant someone was paying attention, but nobody was doing anything. He'd also received the report from the private investigator, a 3-page summary that read like a confession of failure. Subject, Opal Sadler. Age, Bon Muy High. Address, confirmed. Employment, unknown. Social media, non-existent. Criminal record, none. Civil litigation history, none. Credit, excellent. The investigator had found nothing. No debts, no scandals, no history of frivolous complaints, no social media footprint to mine for contradictions. The report concluded with a single line that should have alarmed someone. Subject demonstrates counter-surveillance awareness, inconsistent with stated consumer complaint profile. No one at the Copper Table Group read that line carefully enough. On Opal's side, Lorraine Estes had spent 6 days building a presentation that read like a prosecution file. 2 bankers' boxes. One for the hearing, one backup stored at her office, each containing documents organized by category. Franchise rights, employee complaints, customer complaints, police reports, correspondence, and pattern analysis. Every document was tabbed, cross-referenced, and supported by a timeline that ran along the bottom of each page, like a heartbeat monitor, each spike corresponding to an incident that the Bull Street location had either caused, ignored, or covered up. Lorraine had also filed 3 formal notices. One to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, confirming that the franchise owner was aware of pending employee complaints and requesting to be added as an interested party. One to the Georgia Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, under Georgia Code Section Moyget Noy Motget Noy, Bachinba, requesting a preliminary review of discriminatory business practices at the Copper Table's Bull Street location, and one to the Copper Table Group's legal department requesting a compliance hearing under Article 7 of the franchise agreement, the provision that allowed a franchisee to trigger a formal review of any location's adherence to brand standards, employment law, and customer service protocols. Article 7 hearings were rare. In the Copper Table Group's 12-year history, only 2 had ever been convened, and both had involved financial irregularities, embezzlement, inventory fraud. No Article 7 hearing had ever been triggered by a discrimination complaint. The mechanism existed because franchise law required it, not because anyone expected it to be used. Until now. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Conference Room B, 14th floor, Copper Table Group Regional Headquarters, Peachtree Street, Atlanta. The room had been booked for 2 hours, long enough for a mediation, corporate assumed. They'd even ordered catering, coffee, pastries, sparkling water. The hospitality of people who expected to manage a problem, not confront one. Malcolm Ferris arrived first. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than most of his restaurant employees earned in a week, and he carried a leather portfolio containing his prepared talking points: empathy, apology, policy review, and a settlement framework that topped out at $15,000, and a written apology from Vivian Tate. Standard damage control. Check a box, sign a form, make the problem disappear. Vivian Tate arrived second, driven from Savannah that morning, wearing the cream blazer Opal had seen 3 times now. Her armor, her identity, the uniform of a woman who ran a restaurant the way generals run campaigns. She sat across from Malcolm and reviewed the talking points he'd prepared. "This is excessive," she said, tapping the settlement figure. "She's a walk-in customer who didn't meet our dress code. This happens every week." "It doesn't usually involve police reports and attorney letters," Malcolm replied. "We handle it, we move on. That's the strategy." "The strategy should be telling her the bandstands and showing her the door." "Vivian." Malcolm's voice carried the tired authority of a man who'd managed difficult employees for 20 years. "Let me handle this." Preston Gale arrived third, summoned as a witness. He sat in the corner with a notepad and a bottle of water, and the expression of a man who knew he was in over his head, but couldn't figure out which direction the deep end was. Miles Winthrop arrived fourth, carrying his own file, thinner than Lorraine's because he'd spent less time preparing and more time assuming. He shook hands with Malcolm, nodded at Vivian, and took the seat at the head of the table, which he'd chosen deliberately to establish authority over the proceedings. At 9:58 a.m., the receptionist called down to the conference room. "Mr. Winthrop, your 10 o'clock is here. 2 women. They have boxes. Send them in." The door opened. Opal Sadler walked in first. Same face, same calm eyes, same measured posture, but different context. A context that changed everything about how the room would see her from this moment forward. She wore a simple black blazer over a white blouse, professional, not performative. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except a thin watch. She carried nothing in her hands. The boxes were behind her. Lorraine Estes entered second, a black woman in her late 40s with close-cropped gray hair, tortoiseshell glasses, and the particular energy of an attorney who has spent 15 years in civil rights litigation and has stopped being impressed by conference rooms. She carried 1 banker's box. Her paralegal, a young man named Terrence, who waited in the hallway, carried the second. Lorraine set the box on the table with a sound that was heavier than its weight. "Good morning. My name is Lorraine Estes, of Estes and Calloway, Civil Rights and Employment Law, Atlanta. I'm counsel for Sadler Holdings, LLC." She paused. "Let the name register." Malcolm blinked. His pen stopped moving. "Ms. Sadler is here today in her capacity as franchise owner of 6 Copper Table locations across the state of Georgia, including the Bull Street property in Savannah, managed by Ms. Tate." The room went still. Not quiet. Still. The difference between a room where people have stopped talking and a room where people have stopped breathing. The coffee maker in the corner gurgled. The air conditioning hummed. Someone's phone vibrated in a pocket and was ignored. Vivian Tate's face emptied. Not anger. Not yet. Just a total evacuation of expression, the way a screen goes dark before rebooting. Her eyes moved from Lorraine to Opal and stayed there. and in that gaze was the terrible arithmetic of a woman recalculating every interaction she'd had with the person sitting across from her, the hoodie, the questions, the notebook, the calm, and arriving at a sum that didn't balance. Preston Gale's pen dropped. It hit the table, bounced, rolled to the floor. He didn't pick it up. Malcolm Ferris opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His prepared talking points, the empathy, the apology, the $15,000 settlement, sat in his portfolio like a joke no one would ever laugh at. Miles Winthrop, the corporate attorney, was the first to move. He opened his file, flipped to the franchise agreement section, and ran his finger down the page until he found what he should have found 3 weeks ago when Opal's complaint first arrived. The franchise grant, executed 18 months prior, transferring operational rights for 6 Copper Table locations to Sadler Holdings, LLC. The authorized representative and sole owner, Opal Sadler. The signature on every page, Opal Sadler. The woman sitting across the table from him in a simple black blazer, watching him read with the patience of someone who had been waiting for this moment for 6 weeks. Winthrop started. He stopped, cleared his throat, started again. Ms. Estes, I wasn't informed that the complainant was a franchise owner? No, you weren't. Because my client chose to exercise her rights under Section Muihai, Chambon of the franchise agreement, which I believe you'll find on page 47 of your copy. Winthrop flipped pages. Lorraine didn't wait. Section 12.4. Franchisee retains the right to conduct unannounced compliance audits of any franchised location, including but not limited to operations, personnel conduct, and adherence to brand standards and applicable law. My client conducted a lawful compliance audit of the Bull Street location over a period of approximately 6 weeks. During that audit, she was denied service based on subjective dress code enforcement, subjected to racial discrimination, physically assaulted, falsely accused of theft, and ultimately banned from her own restaurant by an employee who never verified her identity. She opened the banker's box. I have documentation for every claim I've just made, and I'm going to walk you through it. I suggest someone take notes. Nobody moved. Lorraine pulled the first document from the box and placed it on the table. Document 1. The franchise agreement, executed on the date indicated, between Copper Table Group Incorporated and Sadler Holdings, LLC. Ms. Sadler's signature is on every page. I've highlighted Section Muihai Chambon, the audit provision, and Section Chin Bay, which requires all franchise locations to comply with federal and state anti-discrimination law, including Title High of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Bon Muihai USC Section Haingina. She placed the second document beside it. Document 2. Employee complaints. 6 EEOC complaints filed with the Savannah District Office over the past 6 months by 5 separate employees of the Bull Street location, 3 servers, 1 host, and 1 line cook. The complaints allege racial discrimination in scheduling, table assignments, tip pool distribution, and disciplinary actions. These complaints were filed through the EEOC's standard process and are currently in the investigation phase. My client became aware of them through the complaint tracking system maintained under Section Muimot 2 of the franchise agreement, a system she has access to as the franchise owner. Vivian's head turned sharply. She hadn't known about the EEOC complaints, or she'd known and assumed they'd been buried. Either way, her face told the story. This was new information arriving at the worst possible time. Document 3. Lorraine placed a thick packet on the table, tabbed, color-coded, 37 pages. Pattern analysis. 47 online reviews from the past 14 months. Yelp, Google, TripAdvisor. Each describing discriminatory treatment at the Bull Street location. Each posted by a black or brown patron. Each coded by date, type of incident, and personnel involved where identified. The pattern is consistent: differential service times, selective dress code enforcement, hostile treatment by security staff, and management that dismisses complaints. She placed the next document. Document 4. Audio recording. She produced a small USB drive and set it on the table like a chess piece. Voice memo recorded on Ms. Sadler's phone during her first visit to the Bull Street location. Timestamped. Duration: 2 minutes, 47 seconds. Contents: Ms. Tate refusing service, citing a dress code violation that does not appear in the restaurant's posted policy, and refusing to provide corporate contact information when requested. Next document. Document 5. The 911 Dispatch Log and Police Incident Report. Savannah Chatham Metropolitan Police. Case number indicated. Dispatch ID 7432. Date and time indicated. Officers Denham, Badge 478, and Witt, Badge 391. The report confirms. A false theft accusation was made against Ms. Sadler by a server, Ms. Keene, and Ms. Sadler was physically removed from the restaurant by Mr. Henley. Officers searched Ms. Sadler's belongings with her voluntary consent. No stolen property was found. The theft accusation was baseless. She paused. Let the silence do its work. Then placed the next document. A single page. Familiar letterhead. Document 6. The trespass ban. Sent by certified mail to Ms. Sadler, signed by Ms. Tate. Banning the franchise owner from entering her own restaurant on the basis of, and I'm quoting, disruptive conduct, staff complaints, and an ongoing investigation into missing property. The disruptive conduct consisted of asking questions and taking notes. The staff complaints consisted of a fabricated theft accusation, and the ongoing investigation was resolved by police who found nothing. Document 7. The email. Mr. Ferris. Lorraine turned to Malcolm, who had not spoken since the name Sadler Holdings, LLC had entered the room. This is your email to my client, dated the Monday following her formal complaint. I'll read the relevant portion. She lifted the printed page. Quote, "We believe this was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Our dress code is applied consistently to all guests, and our staff acted in good faith." End quote. She set the email down. My client sent you a complaint with a voice memo, a police case number, and documentation of physical assault. You responded with a form letter. You conducted no investigation. You asked no follow-up questions. You didn't request the voice memo or the police report. You didn't contact Ms. Sadler by phone. You consulted with the management team accused of the misconduct and accepted their account without verification. She paused. That's not good faith, Mr. Ferris. That's institutional protection. Malcolm's face had gone the color of old plaster. He stared at the email printout, his own words, highlighted in yellow, glowing under the conference room's fluorescent lights, and said nothing. Lorraine pulled one more document. Document 8. Reservation records. A spreadsheet, printed on legal-size paper, folded once. We obtained this through a data request under Section Muimot Cham Bon of the Franchise Agreement, which grants the franchisee access to operational records for audit purposes. This is 6 months of walk-in guest data for the Bull Street location. Guests refused service for dress code violations, 43. Of those 43, 39 were black or brown, 4 were white. Of the 4 white guests refused, 3 were subsequently reseated after speaking with management. None of the black or brown guests were offered that option. She let the numbers sit. 39 out of 43, 91%. Ms. Tate, Lorraine turned to Vivian for the first time. Would you like to explain to the franchise owner of this restaurant why 91% of guests refused service under your dress code policy are people of color? Vivian's jaw was locked. Her hands were flat on the table, not gripping, not trembling, just flat, as if she needed the surface to keep her from floating away. The dress code is applied to everyone, Vivian said. Her voice was controlled, but the control was audible, a levee holding back a flood. This has nothing to do with 91%, Lorraine repeated. That's not discretion, Ms. Tate. That's discrimination. And the data is from your own system. Winthrop intervened. Ms. Estes, let's take a step back. Your client's franchise agreement includes a mandatory arbitration clause. Section Mui Chin Cham Hai. Any disputes arising from the franchise relationship. Section Mui Chin Cham Hai applies to commercial disputes between franchisor and franchisee, royalty disagreements, territory conflicts, termination provisions. My client's civil rights claim under Title High and her personal injury claim for battery are not commercial disputes. They arise from her experience as a patron of the restaurant, not as the franchise owner. These claims are filed in her personal capacity and are not subject to the arbitration clause. Lorraine opened her briefcase, not the banker's box, a separate leather case she'd carried in her left hand, and produced a printed court opinion. Whitfield v. National Restaurant Group, 11th Circuit, 2021. Franchise arbitration clauses do not bar personal claims arising from conduct experienced during undercover compliance activities. The court held that the plaintiff's status as a franchise owner did not convert a personal injury claim into a commercial dispute. Winthrop took the printout, read it. His expression didn't change, but his posture did. The slight deflation of a man who has just realized his best argument has been anticipated and neutralized. "We'd like a recess," Winthrop said. 30 minutes. "Take as long as you need," Lorraine replied. "We're not going anywhere." Vivian stood abruptly. Her chair scraped the floor, a sharp sound that cut through the conference room's careful acoustics. She turned to Malcolm. "This is a setup. She came into my restaurant, dressed like... She deliberately provoked my staff and recorded everything. That's entrapment." Lorraine didn't look up from her notes. "Entrapment is a defense in criminal cases involving law enforcement coercion, Ms. Tate. A private citizen dining at a restaurant she owns is not entrapment. It's an audit." She didn't identify herself. She came in disguise. She came in a gray hoodie. That's not a disguise. It's a garment. And Section Moi Hai Fabon of the franchise agreement explicitly authorizes unannounced audits. Unannounced means she wasn't required to identify herself. "This is... Malcolm, are you going to say anything?" Malcolm was staring at the reservation data spreadsheet, 39 of 43. The number was still on the table, still glowing under the fluorescent light, still real. He looked up at Vivian with the expression of a man who has just realized that the person he'd been protecting has been the problem all along. "Vivian, let's step out. Let legal handle this." "Legal should have caught this." She turned on Winthrop. "You signed the franchise agreement. You had her name. You had Sadler Holdings, LLC in your files for 18 months. And when her complaint arrived, with that same name, nobody connected it?" Winthrop's jaw tightened. She was right. The failure was his, and everyone in the room knew it. The franchise owner's complaint had arrived at corporate bearing the same surname as the franchise agreement itself, and no one, not Malcolm, not Winthrop, not any member of the legal or operations team, had cross-referenced the two. Because they hadn't expected the franchise owner to be the kind of person who gets turned away from restaurants. They hadn't expected the franchise owner to look like Opal Sadler. The assumption was invisible, and it was everywhere. 30 minutes, Winthrop repeated. His voice was flat. He stood and walked toward the adjoining office. Malcolm followed. Vivian followed Malcolm, and as she passed Opal's chair, she stopped. "You could have told me who you were." Her voice was low. Not quite a whisper, not quite a statement. Something in between. The voice of a woman reaching for an argument she knew wouldn't hold but couldn't stop herself from making. "That first night, you could have shown me the agreement. You could have..." "I could have." Opal looked up at her. "And you would have seated me immediately, called me ma'am, given me the best table in the house, and the next black woman who walked in, the one without the franchise agreement, would have been turned away, just like the 39 others." Vivian's mouth opened, closed. She turned and followed Malcolm through the door. It closed behind her with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Narrator. The recess lasted 47 minutes. During those 47 minutes, Opal sat in the conference room with Lorraine, drinking sparkling water and reviewing notes. She didn't pace, didn't check her phone, didn't exhibit any of the nervous energy that most people display when their life's work is being debated behind a closed door 20 feet away. Lorraine looked at her. "You're remarkably calm for someone who just dropped a bomb in a corporate boardroom." "I've been preparing for this for 18 months. Opal turned a page in her notebook. "The only part that surprised me was the coffee. I expected them to order the cheap brand." Lorraine smiled. It was the first smile either of them had allowed since entering the building. Behind the closed door of the adjoining office, the conversation was not calm. What filtered through the walls, fragments, tones, the muffled percussion of raised voices, told its own story. Winthrop's voice, low and urgent, using words like exposure and liability and pattern evidence. Malcolm's voice, higher, defensive, the words indistinct but the rhythm clear. Denial, qualification, redirect. Vivian's voice, sharp and brittle, breaking through twice, with enough volume to be partially heard. Followed standard procedure. And, how was I supposed to know? Preston Gale sat in the hallway outside the conference room, alone, scrolling through his phone with the 1,000-yard stare of a man who has just understood that his career trajectory has changed direction permanently. At 10:52 a.m., the door opened. Winthrop entered first. His tie was loosened by a quarter inch, the only visible sign of what had happened in the other room. Malcolm followed, carrying his portfolio, which was now closed. Vivian entered last, and something in her had shifted. Not broken, shifted. The cream blazer was still immaculate, the posture still controlled, but the confidence had been replaced by something harder and more desperate. The determination of a person preparing to defend a position she knows is indefensible. Everyone sat. Winthrop spoke first. Ms. Estes, we've reviewed the documentation. The Copper Table Group takes these matters very seriously, and we want to address your client's concerns directly. I appreciate that, Mr. Winthrop. What are you proposing? First, personnel actions. He glanced at a notepad. Miss Tate will be suspended without pay, pending a full internal investigation into management practices at the Bull Street location. Mr. Henley's employment is terminated effective immediately for the physical contact incident. That's consistent with our zero-tolerance policy for staff-on-guest physical altercation. Ms. Keene will be suspended pending review of the theft report. We'll need to determine whether the report was made in good faith or was directed by management. A pause. Mr. Gale will be reassigned to a different location pending the investigation. And Mr. Ferris? Malcolm looked up. The question caught him visibly off guard. Lorraine didn't wait for Winthrop to answer. Mr. Ferris received a detailed complaint with supporting evidence and responded with a form letter. He conducted no investigation. He contacted the accused parties and accepted their account without verification. At minimum, that represents a failure of supervisory responsibility. Winthrop hesitated. Mr. Ferris will be placed on administrative leave during the investigation period. Malcolm's face went rigid. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. The portfolio in front of him, the one containing his $15,000 settlement offer and his carefully prepared talking points, sat untouched, as relevant now as yesterday's newspaper. Second, Winthrop continued, we're prepared to offer Ms. Sadler a formal apology, a review of the dress code policy at all franchise locations, and enhanced training for front-of-house staff on anti-discrimination protocols. Those are internal actions, Lorraine said. What about accountability for what happened to my client personally? She was physically assaulted. She was falsely accused of a crime. She was followed by a private investigator that someone at this organization authorized and funded. The PI comment landed like a grenade in a small room. Winthrop's pen stopped moving. Malcolm's eyes shifted to the table. Vivian looked at the wall. We're not aware of any... Winthrop started. The investigator was documented on 3 occasions in Savannah's historic district. Lorraine produced another document, Opal's time-stamped photographs and incident notes. He physically contacted my client during one encounter, shoving her phone and attempting to seize it from her hand. If your organization didn't authorize this surveillance, then someone acting on its behalf did, and we'll pursue that through discovery. Winthrop took the document, studied it. His jaw worked in the way that jaws work when someone is choosing very carefully between what they want to say and what they should say. I'll look into it, he said. That's not something I can address today. Fair enough, but it will be addressed. Lorraine placed both hands flat on the table. Now, let's discuss the broader picture. My client's personal claims: battery, false imprisonment during the bag search confrontation, defamation via the fabricated theft accusation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Those are civil matters we'll pursue through the appropriate court. The Title High complaint has been referred to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Winthrop's pen stopped again. Additionally, Lorraine continued. I've filed a formal complaint with the Georgia Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division requesting a preliminary review of the Copper Table's dress code enforcement practices across all franchise locations, pursuant to Georgia Code Section Moigach, Noi Motgach Noi Ba Chin Ba. And the 5 EEOC employee complaints remain active and under investigation by the Savannah District Office. She let the list settle. Mr. Winthrop, your organization is facing scrutiny from the EEOC, the Georgia Attorney General, a potential DOJ Civil Rights Division inquiry, and my client's personal civil claims. The personnel actions you've proposed are a starting point, and I want to emphasize that word, starting point. But they do not address the systemic pattern that made these incidents possible. What does your client want? Winthrop asked. The question was direct, stripped of legal language, stripped of strategy, just a man asking another lawyer to name the price. Lorraine looked at Opal. Opal spoke for the first time since entering the conference room. I want 3 things. Her voice was the same voice she'd used in the restaurant foyer, at the bar, in the corridor, on the sidewalk with the police. Level, measured, precise. First, a complete independent audit of all 6 Copper Table locations I own, conducted by a third-party firm I select at corporate's expense. The audit will review hiring practices, service patterns, complaint handling, and dress code enforcement, with findings reported to me and to the EEOC. She paused. Not for effect, for accuracy. Second, I want the dress code language revised at every Copper Table location nationwide. The phrase, at management's sole discretion, is a license to discriminate. It needs to be replaced with objective, specific criteria that can be applied consistently regardless of who's standing at the host stand. Another pause. Third, I want Vivian Tate, Brock Henley, and Jocelyn Keene held accountable through the appropriate legal and administrative channels. Not just internally. Ms. Keene filed a false theft report. That's a misdemeanor under Georgia Code Section Mui Sao Get Noi, Mui Get Noi Hai Mui Sao, and I intend to cooperate with the Chatham County District Attorney's Office if they choose to investigate. Mr. Henley committed battery. That's a matter for criminal prosecution under Georgia Code Section Mui Sao Get Noi Num Get Noi Hai Mui Ba, and my attorney has already forwarded the police report and body cam footage request to the DA's office, and Ms. Tate directed both the false accusation and the physical removal. Her culpability is a matter for the internal investigation, but if the investigation reveals criminal conduct, I expect a referral. The room was silent. Winthrop wrote for 30 seconds without looking up. When he finished, he set his pen down and folded his hands. Ms. Sadler, the independent audit and the dress code revision are items we can discuss in good faith. The criminal referrals are outside our control. Those are prosecutorial decisions. I understand that. I'm not asking you to prosecute anyone. I'm telling you that I intend to cooperate fully with any investigation, and I expect the Copper Table Group to do the same. We will cooperate with all lawful inquiries. Winthrop's response was automatic, the muscle memory of a corporate attorney who had said that sentence 100 times. Then we have a framework, Lorraine said. My client's personal civil claims remain active. The EEOC and AG complaints proceed independently. And the compliance hearing record, including all documentation presented today, will be preserved as part of the franchise oversight file. She stood. Opal stood. One more thing. Lorraine reached into the banker's box and produced the trespass ban letter, the one Vivian Tate had signed, the one that banned the franchise owner from her own restaurant. She placed it on the table in front of Vivian. Miss Tate, for the record, you banned the owner of this restaurant from entering it because she was black, wore a hoodie, and asked questions you didn't want to answer. I'd like this letter entered into the hearing record as Exhibit 14. Vivian looked at the letter. Her own signature. Her own words. Her own decision, made in the certainty that the woman she was banning was nobody. A nuisance. A troublemaker. Someone without the resources or the standing to fight back. She said nothing. Lorraine closed the banker's box. Terrence appeared from the hallway to carry it out. Opal followed Lorraine to the door without looking back. In the doorway, she paused. Turned. Miss Tate. Vivian looked up. The salmon was excellent. You should make sure the next manager keeps the kitchen staff. Then she walked out. If you're still here, you're writing this all the way to the end. And trust me, the ending is worth it. Hit that like button and subscribe now. Let's finish this together. Narrator. The aftermath didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in pieces. Administrative actions and legal filings and internal memos and phone calls and silences that lasted days. The way institutional consequences always arrive, slowly, unevenly, and with enough gaps to remind everyone involved that justice is a process, not an event. The first piece arrived that same afternoon. By 3 p.m. on the day of the hearing, Brock Henley's employee file was marked terminated, immediate. The Copper Table Group's HR department drafted the separation letter, citing violation of the company's zero-tolerance policy regarding physical contact with guests, as documented in Savannah Chatham PD case file. Brock was notified by phone at 4:22 p.m. He did not contest the termination. He filed for unemployment the following Thursday and was approved 3 weeks later. He never set foot in the Copper Table again. Vivian Tate's suspension was formalized by end of business. The terms, indefinite, without pay, pending completion of the internal investigation. She was instructed to surrender her building keys, her corporate credit card, and her access credentials to the restaurant's management system. She drove back to Savannah that evening in the silver Audi and parked it in her own driveway instead of the reserved spot at Bull Street. The following morning, the Bull Street location opened under interim management. A corporate operations supervisor named Diane Okoro sent from the Atlanta office with instructions to maintain normal service while the investigation proceeded. Diane was efficient, professional, and, in a detail that did not escape the notice of the staff, black. She spent her first day reviewing the scheduling system, the reservation records, and the comment card process that routed all feedback directly to the suspended general manager. She replaced the comment cards by the end of her first week. The new ones included a QR code linking to a corporate-hosted feedback portal with an independent review pathway. She also replaced the dress code sign. The new sign was shorter, clearer. It listed specific prohibited items: no swimwear, no clothing with offensive graphics, no shoes that pose safety hazards, and eliminated the phrase, "at management's sole discretion." In its place, all dress code determinations will be applied consistently to all guests in accordance with the Copper Table Group's anti-discrimination policy, available upon request. The old sign, the brass-framed one Opal had photographed from across the street 6 weeks earlier, was taken down, placed in a box, and shipped to Lorraine Estes' office in Atlanta, where it was cataloged as evidence. Narrator. The criminal referrals moved slower. They always do. 3 weeks after the hearing, Lorraine received confirmation that the Chatham County District Attorney's Office had opened a preliminary review of the false theft report filed by Jocelyn Keene. The review was assigned to an assistant DA named Roland Cross, who requested copies of the police report, the body cam footage, which had finally been released under the Georgia Open Records Act, and Opal's incident statement. The body cam footage was significant. It showed officers Denham and Witt arriving at the restaurant, speaking with Opal on the sidewalk, entering the building, interviewing Vivian Tate and Brock Henley and Jocelyn Keene separately, and searching Opal's bag. The footage confirmed every element of Opal's account: the accusation, the denial, the search, the absence of stolen property, and Opal's calm, detailed statement to the officers. But the footage also showed something else. In the background of Witt's body cam, while he was inside the restaurant interviewing Vivian, a fragment of conversation was captured between Vivian and Jocelyn, barely audible, partially obscured by ambient noise, but enhanced by the DA's audio team to the point of comprehensibility. Vivian's voice. "You said you saw her near the table." Jocelyn's voice. "You told me to say that." Vivian's voice, sharper. "I told you to report what you saw. If you saw her near the table." Jocelyn's voice. "She wasn't near the table, she was at the bar. I told you that. You said it didn't matter, that we needed a reason to get her out." The exchange lasted 9 seconds. It was captured at 21 minutes and 14 seconds into Officer Witt's body cam recording, while Witt was in a different part of the restaurant and unaware the conversation was occurring. 9 seconds that changed the legal calculus entirely, because the exchange, if authenticated and admissible, suggested that Vivian Tate had directed Jocelyn Keene to file a false theft report. Not that Jocelyn had acted alone, not that she'd been mistaken in good faith, but that she'd been instructed to fabricate an accusation by her supervisor in order to manufacture a pretext for removing a black customer. Lorraine filed the footage transcript with both the DA's office and her own civil case file. She also forwarded it to the EEOC and the AG's Consumer Protection Division, noting that the exchange supported a pattern of management-directed discrimination rather than individual staff misconduct. The distinction mattered. Individual misconduct is an isolated incident, regrettable, disciplinable, but contained. Management-directed discrimination is institutional. It implicates training, culture, supervision, and the organizational structure that allowed a general manager to weaponize her staff against customers based on race. The DA's office called Lorraine. "We're upgrading the review from preliminary to active investigation. Miss Keene is being offered the opportunity to provide a full statement in exchange for consideration in the charging decision. Ms. Tate may be facing charges of her own: conspiracy to file a false report under Georgia Code Section Mui Get Noi Hai Mui Sao, and potentially false imprisonment under Georgia Code Section Mui Get Noi Num Get Noi Bon Mui Mod, depending on how the bag search confrontation is characterized." Lorraine relayed the update to Opal. "How long?" Opal asked. "Months. Maybe 6, probably more. The DA will want to build a thorough case if he's going to charge a restaurant manager with conspiracy, and Vivian will hire a defense attorney who'll fight every step." "I can wait. I know you can." Narrator. While the criminal investigation built momentum in Savannah, the civil and administrative processes were unfolding on their own timelines. The EEOC investigation into employee complaints at the Bull Street location entered its discovery phase. Investigators from the Savannah District Office conducted on-site interviews with current and former staff, reviewed scheduling data, tip pool records, and disciplinary files, and requested access to internal communications, emails, text messages, and management meeting notes between Vivian Tate, Preston Gale, and corporate leadership. The investigation was thorough. It was also slow. EEOC investigations typically take 6 to 12 months to reach a determination, and the Bull Street case was complicated by the volume of evidence and the number of complainants. During the 3rd month of the investigation, a 6th employee filed a complaint. A former host named Marcus Webb, who had been terminated by Vivian Tate 5 months earlier for what his personnel file described as insubordination. Marcus's complaint told a different story. He'd refused to implement Vivian's unofficial seating protocol, the system by which black guests were given longer wait times, worse tables, and less attentive service, and had been fired for it. Marcus's complaint included something none of the previous complaints had: a text message exchange between himself and Vivian Tate, preserved on his personal phone, in which Vivian wrote, in language that Lorraine later described as the most clearly discriminatory communication I've seen in 15 years of practice, instructions for how to manage certain guests who don't fit the brand. The messages were damning in their casualness, not grand declarations of racial hostility, but the bureaucratic language of discrimination that has learned to disguise itself. When walk-ins don't match the room, use the wait list. Bon muy lum foot minimum. Most will leave on their own. If they stay, seat near kitchen or restrooms. Devin knows which tables. Don't put comment cards on those tables. If they ask, say we're out. Each message was time-stamped. Each was sent from Vivian's personal phone number, a number Marcus had been required to use for after-hours scheduling questions. Each was addressed to Marcus specifically because, as the host, he was the first line of enforcement in Vivian's system. Marcus had saved them because he knew they were wrong. He hadn't reported them because he needed the job, a calculation that millions of workers make every day, weighing moral objection against rent and groceries and health insurance. When Vivian fired him for refusing to implement the seating protocol, the calculation changed. The job was gone. The messages remained. Lorraine filed them as supplemental evidence in Opal's civil case. The messages were also forwarded to the EEOC and the AG's office. The text messages were forwarded to the EEOC investigator, to Lorraine, and to the Georgia Attorney General's office. The AG's office had been conducting its own review, slower than the EEOC, more cautious, more politically aware of the implications of challenging a prominent Savannah business. The Consumer Protection Division had assigned the case to a senior investigator named Patricia Young, who had spent 2 months reviewing the complaint, the pattern analysis, and the franchise agreement before concluding that the evidence warranted further inquiry. Further inquiry meant subpoena power. The AG's office issued subpoenas for the Copper Table Group's internal dress code enforcement records, training materials, and any communications referencing guest appearance, dress, or demographic profiles. The Copper Table Group's legal team fought the subpoenas. They filed motions arguing that the records were proprietary, that the AG's investigation exceeded its statutory authority, and that the franchise agreement's internal resolution mechanisms should be exhausted before state agencies intervened. The motions were denied by a Chatham County Superior Court judge who wrote, in a ruling that would be quoted in local media, "A restaurant's dress code is a matter of public accommodation, not private preference. When enforcement data suggests a pattern of racial discrimination, the state's interest in protecting civil rights overrides the business's interest in keeping that data private." The subpoenaed records arrived at the AG's office 4 months after the hearing. Narrator. Opal Sadler followed each development from her kitchen table in the bungalow outside Savannah. She didn't give interviews. She didn't post on social media. She didn't hire a publicist or appear on local news. When the Savannah Morning News ran a story about the AG's investigation, State Probe's discrimination claims at Savannah restaurant, Opal declined to comment. When a local television station left a message requesting an on-camera interview, Lorraine returned the call and said, "My client's position is documented in the public record. She has nothing to add at this time." The silence was deliberate. Opal understood, from experience she hadn't yet shared with anyone except Lorraine, that public attention was a tool with a short shelf life. Used too early, it creates sympathy. Used too late, it creates fatigue. The window for maximum impact was narrow, and she wasn't ready to open it. Instead, she focused on the 6 restaurants that bore her name. The independent audit she'd requested at the hearing was underway, conducted by a third-party firm based in Washington, D.C., specializing in civil rights compliance for hospitality businesses. The auditors visited all 6 locations over a 3-week period, using the same methodology Opal had used at Bull Street, undercover visits by auditors of different races, genders, and dress styles, followed by data analysis comparing service times, seating patterns, dress code enforcement, and complaint resolution across demographic categories. The results confirmed what Opal had suspected but needed data to prove. The Bull Street location was an outlier. The other 5 locations, managed by different general managers, staffed by different teams, showed no statistically significant disparities in service or enforcement. The problem wasn't the Copper Table brand. The problem was one location, one manager, and a culture of discrimination that had been allowed to flourish because no one had looked closely enough to see it, or because the people who saw it didn't have the power to stop it, or because the people with the power to stop it had chosen not to. The audit also revealed something Opal hadn't anticipated. At the Bull Street location, staff turnover among Black employees was 312% higher than at any other Copper Table property. The average tenure of a Black server at Bull Street was 4.7 months, compared to 14 months at the next lowest location and 22 months at the highest. The numbers told a story that no interview could capture. People arrived, experienced the culture Vivian had built, and left, over and over. A revolving door that the restaurant absorbed as normal turnover, but that the audit identified as a symptom of a hostile work environment. The exit interview data, which the Copper Table Group was required to maintain under its own HR policy, but which no one at Bull Street had reviewed in the past 2 years, contained 31 responses from departed Black employees. The most common reason cited for leaving: workplace culture. The second most common: management. The third: unfair treatment. None of the exit interviews had been flagged for review. None had been forwarded to corporate. None had triggered the internal investigation protocols that the company's own employee handbook required when patterns of dissatisfaction emerged. The data existed. The system had generated it, and the system had ignored it because the system was designed to generate data, not to act on it. The forms were filled out, filed, and forgotten. The exit interviews were collected, stored, and never read. The turnover numbers were absorbed into quarterly reports that nobody questioned because the restaurant was profitable and profitable businesses don't get scrutinized, until someone with a leather notebook walked in and started counting. Opal read the audit report in her kitchen, at the same table where she'd reviewed the original complaint folder 6 weeks before the first visit. The table was covered in documents now: audit results, legal correspondence, EEOC updates, AG filings, a paper landscape of accountability that had grown from a single manila folder into something that filled 2 filing cabinets in her office. She closed the report, made a note in her notebook, the same leather notebook that Preston Gale had tried to tear from her hands, the one with the creased spine that she'd never replaced. Then she picked up her phone and called Lorraine. The audit's clean on 5 locations. Bull Street is the problem. That's consistent with the EEOC findings so far. They're focusing on Bull Street. What's the timeline? The EEOC will issue preliminary findings in the next 6 to 8 weeks. The AG's office is further behind. They're still processing the subpoenaed records, and the DA is building the criminal case against Vivian. Jocelyn Keene gave a full statement 2 weeks ago. What did she say? That Vivian directed her to file the false theft report, that she was told it was a management tool for removing problem guests, that she'd seen it done before, at least twice in the previous year, with other black customers, and that Preston Gale was present for at least one of those previous incidents and said nothing. Opal was quiet for a moment. Preston knew? According to Jocelyn, yes. Whether that's corroborated remains to be seen, but it changes his exposure significantly. What happens to Jocelyn? What happens to... The DA offered her a deferred prosecution agreement. She cooperates fully, provides testimony if the case goes to trial, and the charges against her are dropped after 12 months of compliance. It's standard for cooperating witnesses in cases like this. And Vivian? Vivian hired an attorney, Cliff Towner, out of Savannah. He's competent. He'll argue that the dress code was applied in good faith, that the theft report was a genuine misunderstanding, and that Vivian is being scapegoated by a franchise owner with a grudge. A grudge. That's the narrative he'll push. Wealthy franchise owner embarrasses working manager to make a political statement. It won't hold up against the data, but it'll slow things down. I've been waiting 6 months already. I know. And it may be another 6 before the criminal case resolves. The civil claims will take longer. We're looking at 12 to 18 months for the Title High complaint to work through the system, and the personal injury claims could take 2 years if they don't settle. They'll try to settle. They already are. Narrator. The Copper Table Group's settlement offer arrived by courier on a Thursday afternoon, 5 months after the compliance hearing. It came in a thick envelope with the law firm's embossed letterhead, Winthrop, Collier and Associates, and it contained a 14-page proposed settlement agreement that Lorraine read twice before calling Opal. The terms, an undisclosed sum. Significant, Lorraine noted, larger than she'd expected. In exchange for a full release of all civil claims, a non-disclosure agreement preventing Opal from discussing the settlement or any details of the compliance audit, and a non-disparagement clause prohibiting public criticism of the Copper Table Group, its employees, or its business practices. They want silence, Lorraine said. They want to erase it. In legal terms, yes, the NDA would prevent you from speaking publicly about what happened, sharing the audit findings, or cooperating with media inquiries. The non-disparagement clause would prohibit you from criticizing the brand even in private forums. What about the EEOC complaints? The AG investigation? Those proceed independently regardless of whether you sign. But without your public cooperation, the investigations lose their most visible complainant. The employees' cases are stronger with you in the picture. Opal was quiet for a long time. Decline it. Are you sure? The amount is... Decline it. Don't counter. Just decline. Opal. I didn't do this for money, Lorraine. I did it because 5 employees filed complaints and nobody listened. I did it because 47 customers wrote reviews and nothing changed. I did it because a woman in a cream blazer looked at me in a gray hoodie and decided I was nobody. And the entire system behind her agreed. She took a breath. If I sign that NDA, the system wins. Not the people in it, the system. The one that turns discrimination into misunderstandings and accountability into settlements and silence into consent. I'm not signing. Then we proceed to litigation. Lorraine filed the formal rejection the following morning. The Copper Table Group's attorneys responded with a revised offer 48 hours later. Higher sum, slightly relaxed, N. DA terms that would allow Opal to discuss the case in general terms, but not name individuals or cite specific data. Lorraine rejected it without consulting Opal because Opal had given her standing instructions. No NDA. No silence. No erasure. The rejections created a different kind of pressure, not on Opal, but on the corporation. Every rejected settlement increased the Copper Table Group's litigation exposure. Every month that passed without resolution allowed the EEOC investigation to deepen, the AG's inquiry to expand, and the public record to grow. The corporate board, which had been briefed after the second rejection, began asking questions that Malcolm Ferris and Miles Winthrop didn't want to answer. How did we miss this? Why wasn't the franchise owner's complaint flagged? Who authorized the private investigator? And what's in the 2023 audit? The last question was the one no one wanted to answer, and the fact that it was being asked internally, that it had migrated from a leaked email to a boardroom conversation, meant that the 2023 audit was real, that people knew about it, and that its contents were dangerous enough to discuss behind closed doors but not dangerous enough, apparently, to disclose voluntarily. 2 weeks after the second rejection, Opal received a handwritten letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked Savannah. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper, written in careful cursive by someone who had taken time to choose each word. Miss Sadler, I don't know if this will reach you, but I wanted to write. My name is Iris Colvin. I worked at the Copper Table on Bull Street for 9 months as a server before I quit. I'm 23. I'm black. I filed one of the EEOC complaints. I didn't think anyone would ever do anything. I filed because the lawyer at the Community Legal Aid Office told me I should, but I thought it would disappear like everything else, like the comment cards that went to Vivian, like the complaints that went to Malcolm, like the time I told Preston that Jocelyn was giving my tables away to white servers, and he said I was being sensitive. I quit because I couldn't take it anymore. Not the customers. The customers were mostly fine. It was the system, the way they decided who mattered before you even opened your mouth. The way they trained us to sort people by how they looked, what they wore, what they sounded like. The way Vivian could smile at someone and destroy them at the same time. I heard what you did. Not the details. Just that someone had been investigating, someone with the power to actually change things. I don't know how it ends. I don't know if anything will really change. But I wanted you to know that for 9 months I felt invisible in that building, and for the first time I feel like someone saw what I saw. Thank you for not disappearing. Opal read the letter twice, set it on the kitchen table beside the declined settlement offer. 2 documents from 2 different worlds, one from a corporation trying to purchase silence, one from a young woman breaking it. She didn't respond to Iris's letter that day. She wasn't sure what to say. What do you tell someone who thanks you for doing something you're not sure was enough? What do you tell a 23-year-old who filed an EEOC complaint from a community legal aid office that the system she's fighting might take years to produce even a partial result? She filed the letter in a new folder, not red, not blue, not green. A plain manila folder with no label, kept separate from the evidence because it wasn't evidence. It was something else. Something that mattered more than data. Narrator. The months that followed were not dramatic, they were procedural. The grind of depositions and document requests and motion practice that constitutes the vast majority of civil rights litigation. No courtroom speeches, no surprise witnesses, no dramatic revelations. Just paper and process, and the slow machinery of a legal system that was designed to be slow because slow protects institutions better than speed. The EEOC issued its preliminary findings 7 months after the compliance hearing. The language was careful, bureaucratic, hedged with qualifiers. But the conclusion was clear. The evidence gathered during the investigation is consistent with a pattern of disparate treatment at the Copper Table's Bull Street location, in potential violation of Title Bay of the Civil Rights Act of Mot Ngin Chin Trum Sao Mui Tu. The Commission recommends conciliation prior to potential enforcement action. Conciliation, another word for negotiation. Another opportunity for the system to resolve itself quietly, without public accountability, without precedent-setting rulings, without the kind of visible consequences that might discourage the next Vivian Tate at the next restaurant in the next city. The Georgia Attorney General's office issued its own findings 2 weeks later. The language was slightly less cautious. The Consumer Protection Division has determined that sufficient evidence exists to support a finding of deceptive business practices in the enforcement of dress code policies at the Copper Table, Bull Street, Savannah, in violation of Georgia Code Section Moigach Noi Motgach Noi Ba Chin Ba. The division will pursue a consent decree requiring revised policies, staff training, and third-party monitoring for a period of 24 months. A consent decree, not a penalty, not a fine, a requirement to do better, monitored for 2 years, after which the monitoring would end, and the restaurant would be free to return to whatever practices it chose. Opal read both findings at her kitchen table. She placed them in the filing cabinet beside the audit report, the settlement offer she'd declined, and the trespass ban letter she'd kept as a reminder. Then she opened a new email from Lorraine. Chatham County DA has filed charges against Vivian Tate. 2 counts. Conspiracy to file a false report, Georgia Code Section Mui Sao Gat Noi, Mui Gat Noi Hai Mui Sao, and false imprisonment, Georgia Code Section Mui Sao Gat Noi, Num Gat Noi, Bon Mui Mot. Arraignment scheduled for next month. Cliff Towner has entered a not guilty plea on her behalf. Opal read the email twice. Then she closed her laptop and sat in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the silence. It wasn't satisfaction she felt. It wasn't vindication. It was something quieter and more complicated, the recognition that every piece of accountability she'd fought for was partial, contested, and temporary. Vivian would plead not guilty and fight the charges for months or years. The consent decree would expire. The EEOC conciliation might produce a settlement that changed nothing. The new dress code sign might come down when the monitoring ended. The next Vivian Tate might already be managing another restaurant, enforcing another vague policy, turning away another woman in a hoodie. But the employees who filed complaints had been heard, the data existed, the record was public, and the woman who'd been banned from her own restaurant had walked back in, not through the front door, but through the legal system, and demanded that the people who dismissed her account for who she was. Small victories, hard won, incomplete, but real. Narrator. 8 months after the compliance hearing, Opal drove to Savannah on a Sunday evening. She parked on Bull Street, sat in her car for a few minutes, watching the restaurant through the windshield. The Copper Table was open, dinner service, the windows glowing warm, the sidewalk busy with the Sunday evening crowd. The new dress code sign was visible through the glass. The interim manager, Diane Okoro, was at the host stand, greeting a black couple in jeans and casual tops, with the same smile she gave everyone. Opal watched them be seated at a window table. She didn't go in. She hadn't been inside since the night Brock Henley had slammed her into a wall and scattered her belongings across the corridor floor. She'd spent months fighting for accountability from the outside, but going back inside felt different, vulnerable in a way that legal briefs and compliance hearings couldn't protect against. She sat with that feeling for a while, didn't judge it, didn't push it away, just let it exist, the way she let everything exist before deciding what to do with it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lorraine. Vivian's attorney requested a plea conference with the DA. They're discussing a deal, probably a misdemeanor plea, probation, community service. No jail time. She'll never manage a restaurant in Georgia again. The conviction will follow her, but she won't go to prison. Opal typed back, "Is that justice?" Lorraine's reply came after a long pause. "It's what the system produces. Whether it's justice is a question for philosophers." Opal thought about that for a moment. Vivian Tate, the woman who had looked at her in a gray hoodie and decided she was furniture, the woman who had instructed a server to fabricate a theft report, the woman who had signed a trespass ban against the person who owned the building, would plead guilty to a misdemeanor. She would receive probation. She would perform community service, probably at an organization she'd never voluntarily visit, surrounded by people she'd spent her career sorting into categories of deserving and undeserving. And she would carry a criminal record that would follow her like a shadow, not into prison, but into every future job application, every background check, every moment when someone typed her name into a search engine and found the Savannah Morning News article that would be written about the plea. It wasn't enough. It was also more than most cases like this produced. Preston Gale's outcome was quieter. The internal investigation found that he had been aware of inconsistencies in service delivery and had failed to escalate concerns through appropriate channels. His reassignment became permanent. He was transferred to a copper table location in suburban Atlanta, demoted from assistant manager to shift supervisor, his salary reduced by 18%. He didn't contest it. He didn't file a complaint. He simply showed up at his new location, did his job, and became the kind of middle manager who avoids eye contact with customers who look like they might ask difficult questions. He had been in the corridor when Brock grabbed Opal's arm. He had said, "Brock, that's enough," but softly, without conviction, in the voice of a man who knew right from wrong, but lacked the courage to choose when choosing mattered. That voice, thin, insufficient, arriving a beat too late, was the sound of complicity dressed as concern. And it was, in many ways, more damaging than Brock's physical aggression or Vivian's calculated hostility, because it represented the vast middle ground of institutional discrimination. The people who see, who know, who could intervene, and who choose instead to murmur their objections quietly enough that no one has to hear them. Jocelyn Keene completed her deferred prosecution agreement 12 months after the compliance hearing. The charges were dropped. She moved to Jacksonville and took a job at a hotel restaurant where, according to her LinkedIn profile, she was passionate about hospitality and guest satisfaction. She never contacted Opal. She never contacted Iris. She never contacted any of the 5 employees whose EEOC complaints had helped build the case. She simply moved on, the way people move on when accountability is structured as a transaction rather than a transformation. Brock Henley disappeared from public view. No LinkedIn, no social media, no forwarding address on his unemployment file. Lorraine's investigator located him 4 months later in a small town in South Georgia, working security at a warehouse distribution center. The civil suit for battery was served at his new employer's address. He did not respond within the 30-day filing window, and Lorraine moved for a default judgment. Opal set the phone down, looked at the restaurant one more time. Then she noticed something. In the window of the building next door, the cafe where she'd sat on that first Tuesday morning, watching the copper table's staff arrive, there was a new sign, a small business, a law office. The lettering on the window read, "Community Legal Aid, Free Consultations, Employment Rights, Housing Discrimination, Consumer Protection." It hadn't been there 6 months ago. She didn't know if it was connected to her case or if it was coincidence. The kind of coincidence that happens when a community's attention gets pointed at a problem long enough for someone to decide to do something about it. She photographed the sign, added it to the notebook. Then she started the car and pulled into traffic. Her phone buzzed again, an email, and she glanced at the notification on the screen before focusing on the road. From Recoverably Group Subject, RE, FWD, Sadler Holdings, internal only. Date, today. She'd seen emails like this before, fragments of internal corporate communication that arrived in her inbox through channels she couldn't always trace. Forwarded by mistake, or forwarded by someone inside the organization who wanted her to see what was being said behind closed doors. She pulled over, opened the email. The body was 2 lines.
both partially redacted with heavy black bars obscuring names and figures. But one phrase was visible, floating in a sea of black ink like a message in a bottle. Liability exposure exceeds what legal has approved. Recommend accelerating the NDA timeline before the AG office requests access to the 2023 audit that was never disclosed to the franchisee. The 2023 audit. Never disclosed. An audit that predated Opal's franchise purchase. An audit that had never appeared in the due diligence documents she'd reviewed before signing the franchise agreement. An audit that, if it existed, and if it documented problems at the Bull Street location, meant that the Copper Table Group had known about discriminatory practices before selling Opal the franchise and had concealed that knowledge, which would transform her civil claims from a single location dispute into a fraud case. She saved the email, forwarded it to Lorraine. Then she sat in the parked car on a Savannah side street, engine running, watching the evening settle over the live oaks and the cobblestones and the gas lamps that made this city look like a postcard, beautiful on the surface, complicated underneath, full of histories that didn't make it onto the tour. The leather notebook sat on the passenger seat, full. Every page covered in dates and names and evidence that had changed one restaurant, maybe. That had exposed one manager, definitely. That had produced partial accountability from a system designed to resist accountability the way water resists being held. The 2023 audit was a new thread. A thread that, if pulled, might unravel something larger than one location, one manager, one dress code sign. Or it might lead nowhere. Might be a rumor, might be a typo, might be the kind of internal document that corporations generate and forget and deny ever existed. But Opal Sadler didn't leave threads unpulled, hadn't for 18 months, wouldn't start now. She put the car in gear, pulled into traffic. The restaurant disappeared in her rearview mirror, still open, still serving, still standing. The system had noticed her, had fought her, had tried to buy her silence, and when that failed, had settled into the slow resistance of process and procedure and delay. Whether it would change, genuinely, permanently, in the ways that mattered, was a question that couldn't be answered tonight. Or this month, or maybe this year. Change in institutions doesn't arrive like a verdict. It arrives like weather, slowly, unevenly, sometimes reversing direction without warning. But the record existed now. The data was public. The employees had been heard. The dress code sign had been replaced. And somewhere in a filing cabinet in Atlanta, a trespass ban letter sat in an evidence folder, a letter that banned a woman from her own restaurant, signed by an employee who never imagined the woman she was dismissing might be the one person with the power to hold her accountable. Opal drove home. The bungalow was dark. She turned on the kitchen light, set the notebook on the table, and stood there for a moment, looking at the space where this had all started. A manila folder, a cup of coffee, and a decision to stop reading complaints and start experiencing them firsthand. The coffee maker sat on the counter, ready for 5:45 a.m. tomorrow. The mug was in its place, the spoon beside it. She turned off the light, walked to the bedroom, and for the first time in 8 months, she slept without setting an alarm. Tomorrow there would be a new email from Lorraine, a new filing, a new development in a case that had grown from one woman in a hoodie to a federal inquiry, a state investigation, and a criminal prosecution. Not because the system worked the way it should, but because one person had documented everything, endured everything, and refused to sign the paper that would make everything disappear. Outside the bungalow, the Georgia night was warm and still. The freight train rolled through the rail yard south of town, the same sound Opal heard every evening, steady and indifferent to the dramas playing out in the houses along its route. Inside the Copper Table on Bull Street, Diane Okoro was closing up for the night. She locked the front door, turned off the chandelier, and paused at the new dress code sign, the one without the phrase, "at management's sole discretion." She read it once, nodded to herself, then turned off the lights and left, locking the door behind her. The restaurant sat empty in the dark. Tables set for tomorrow. Glasses polished. The kitchen clean. Everything in order. Everything looking the way it was supposed to look.
But in the filing cabinet of a civil rights attorney in Atlanta, the old sign waited, brass-framed, vaguely worded. The artifact of a system that had worked exactly as designed, protecting some, excluding others, and relying on the certainty that the people being excluded would never have the resources, the evidence, or the endurance to fight back. That certainty had been wrong. And somewhere in a Chatham County courthouse, a case file waited for its next hearing date, a date that might bring a plea deal, or might bring a trial, that might produce accountability, or might produce another compromise, but that would, either way, add one more line to the public record. One more line that said, this happened. Someone saw it. Someone wrote it down. And someone refused to let it disappear. The night settled. The city slept. And Opal Sadler's leather notebook sat on the kitchen table in the dark, its pages full, its spine creased, its work, for now, done, but not finished. Never quite finished. Because the 2023 audit was still out there. And tomorrow, the work would begin again. Narrator. This story is not about a restaurant. And it's not about a hoodie. It's about what happens when someone with power looks at someone without it, or someone they believe is without it, and decides that person doesn't belong. It's about the 1,000 small decisions that add up to a system. The hostess who seats one family immediately and tells another to wait. The server who lingers at one table and ignores the next. The manager who enforces a policy against certain bodies and waives it for others. None of those decisions, taken alone, looks like discrimination. Taken together, they are discrimination. Structural, habitual, and invisible to everyone except the people who experience it. Opal Sadler didn't fix the copper table. One person can't fix a system, but she did something that systems fear more than lawsuits or fines or bad press. She created a record. She wrote things down. She saved receipts. She turned lived experience into evidence, and evidence into accountability. Partial, imperfect, incomplete accountability, but accountability nonetheless. And that matters, because systems survive on amnesia. They survive on the assumption that the people they harm will move on, forget, stay quiet, accept the settlement, sign the NDA, and let the cycle restart. Every time someone refuses, every time someone writes it down, files the complaint, keeps the receipt, and says, no, I won't let this disappear, the system loses a little of its power. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough. So if you've ever been told you don't belong in a space you have every right to occupy, write it down, save the receipt, note the date, the time, the name. Build your record. Because power isn't just money or title or authority. Power is evidence. And evidence is something no one can take from you once you've created it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Smash that like button. Subscribe to this channel. And leave a comment telling us, have you ever been judged by what you were wearing instead of who you are? Your story matters. We read every single one. And stay tuned, because the next story on this channel will remind you once again that you never know who you're dealing with.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.